Okay. Thank you all for watching, tuning in. Throw me a comment real quick and let me know that you can see and hear everything okay, and we'll get going. Cool. All right. Looks like we are good to go. That whole 20-second delay is me just waiting in fear that someone won't be able to hear me. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. We have a little while to go until Joe Biden's State of the Union speech. Thank you all again for jumping on here so we can listen to it. This will start in a little over an hour here. So we'll do like a pre-show. We'll do a rundown of what I expect that we'll hear from Joe Biden and a little bit of what we should expect to hear from the Republican response, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who we were lucky enough to put out of our lives for a brief stint before she came surging back in as the governor of Arkansas now and then the designee to do this Republican response. So a few points of what I think we should expect to hear on Biden's side from the State of the Union speech tonight. And I think it's really indicative of like kind of really the broader argument that Democrats have been making, because we've seen a lot of the culture war bullshit sprouting up from the Republican side in these really in the last month or so, while Republicans have had the majority. You know, it's gone from one quote unquote scandal to the next, from, I guess, green M&Ms or M&Ms in general not being allowed to wear shoes. I don't know, this is me trying to work this out in real time. I don't really know what the whole M&M scandal is, but from M&Ms to the Democrats are coming to take your gas stoves, to the Democrats are coming to take your Xboxes, Democrats are coming to take your coffee, Democrats are coming to take your chocolate milk. Now we have the whole balloon gate. So, you know, from one issue to the next, it's kind of been just points of manufactured outrage. And when you compare that, or I guess contrast that with what Democrats have put forward, it kind of puts on full display why, or gives justification as to why Republicans are so desperate to train your attention onto other things. And that is because what we see with what Democrats have done in just the last year, but really the last 2 years since they've had this small majority in both houses of Congress that's gone away for this term now. But what we saw is Democrats, pass the American Rescue Plan, which allowed us to have free vaccines, free COVID tests, to the first gun safety bill in 30 years, to the Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed the government to negotiate lower drug prices, which is something that we've been screaming about for decades. It was the biggest climate investment in the history of this country. It finally taxed ultra-wealthy corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations and above, who haven't paid anything in corporate taxes. We passed the CHIPS Act, which led to kind of an explosion of jobs and infrastructure in this country, in the creation of fiber or other green technology, whatever it was, fiber optic cables, green technology, solar panels, chips, whatever it was. We saw them pass the PACT Act, which was veteran health care. We saw them add 12.1 million jobs, bring the unemployment rate down to a 50-year low in 3.4%. We saw them add 800,000 manufacturing jobs because manufacturing was something that Trump was supposed to bring back, except in his term, we lost more manufacturing jobs than he created, and they brought almost 1 million of those manufacturing jobs back today, and that'll only continue to grow because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. We watched as Black and Hispanic unemployment rates went down to 5.4% and 4.5%. So, on issue after issue after issue, we've kind of watched as I have a list of some more. We have the infrastructure law that I forgot to mention, which was a punchline during the Trump administration. They finally got it done for this one. The Respect for Marriage Act, which, it's a shame that we have to pass something like this to kind of protect against what we may see the Supreme Court do in overturning Obergefell, which obviously we hope won't happen, but at least it puts in a federal law that you have to recognize pre-existing same-sex and interracial marriages for if and when the Supreme Court decides that that's not okay either. We have the rest of them I mentioned already. So in any case, all of those things are kind of like actual tangible benefits for people's lives. And, in a way, Republicans have always been running on this culture war stuff because they need to, because this is what they have. The culture war stuff is kind of, scaring their old white base is what's always driven people to the polls. It's always just an emotional appeal because, let's be honest, their audience is not going to sit down and go fact searching for jobs data, even though that jobs data would show that there's not been a single Republican administration in the last 3 decades that's created more jobs than a Democratic administration. But they're not going to look for that information. What works for them, what works on that side of the aisle is just pure, raw, emotional appeal. And so that's why we, leading into every election, we see the migrant caravan talking points sprout up because they're trying to fearmonger about brown people coming to steal your wives and sell drugs to your kids or whatever it is. And so, this is just a continuation of that. It's that the Democrats are coming to take away everything that you hold dear, whether that's M&Ms or your gas stoves, which ironically enough, the places where these attacks are being launched most fervently are Florida, where I think 92% of the stoves in that state are electric, which is just, it just kind of goes to show the performative nature of all of this outrage, of the outrage cycle on the right, is that they're coming to take away your gas stoves that nobody actually has. And the irony is that most of the gas stoves in this country are in deep blue states, like the one I live in California. We have gas stoves. So, but this is always what's worked. And I think that the reason that they have to put it on overdrive right now is because if people are left to just see what's actually happening in this country, which is that wages are up 4.4% over the year, and they've outpaced inflation in the last 6 months. Inflation's down. Real CPI was down to negative 0.01%. So, I think that if you were to look at the actual situation in front of us right now, and this is coming out of a pandemic as well. Like we're of all the G7 countries, the United States is leading the pack in terms of GDP growth. We have the fastest recovery of every industrialized nation in the world. So if you were to look at the actual stuff, the actual economic situation that we're in right now, you would see that we are in a good spot, just like we always are after a Republican administration. We've seen recessions from almost every Republican administration in my lifetime, followed by a recovery from every Democratic administration in my lifetime. And that's exactly what's happening here. So the fact is that Republicans have to put these bullshit culture war issues onto overdrive, because if they don't, people will just see that we are adding jobs at a faster clip in this country than we've ever seen before. Our unemployment rate is sinking faster than we've ever seen before. The pool of workers, of workers who are eligible to work in this country, is growing right now. Wages are going up right now. Unemployment is going down right now. So, I think that they have a vested interest in continuing to do that. But the fact is that I think, and look, I may be completely off base on this, but I think that its potency is getting less and less because the ridiculousness of these culture war topics are becoming like so laughable on their faces. And again, I may be wrong. This may work perfectly well. There may be people out there who, are guarding their M&Ms with their shotguns on their couches, and I'll eat my words. But, I would presume that there are fewer and fewer people who are sitting there and saying, like, let's tune in to see what the Republicans have to say today. The party of the Constitution has to say today, the party of Abraham Lincoln. And these people are just screaming about, about gas stoves and pronouns, just like they always do. And so, as like the older generation who watches this stuff and just clings onto this stuff for dear life and is so gullible that they'll believe them, as they get replaced by like Gen Z voters who don't fall for this shit, and because Republicans refuse to adapt to this new generation, other than like trotting out Charlie Kirk as if he's going to be the person to like bring all of Gen Z into the GOP, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse for them. But again, I may be completely off base. This culture war stuff might work perfectly well. There might be this massive contingent out there who, for whom gas stoves is their number one issue and what they vote on every election. So who knows? Maybe the economy isn't a big deal, and instead M&Ms are the biggest deal, and scaring people about Xboxes being taken away. Also, the Venn diagram for people who are worried about their Xboxes getting taken away, and people who watch Fox News and actually believe the things that Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham say is like this. You could fly a plane through those two circles. So I don't think anybody worried about their Xboxes I think that the audience that has Fox News droning on in the background in like orthopedist's office is not too worried about their Xboxes getting taken away. Or this latest one was chocolate milk, which I didn't even bother to like really look into, but I do know that there is a whole chocolate milk fear-mongering thing happening right now. So we'll see what happens on that front. Another point that I wanted to bring up is a little bit of what's happening today in the news, and that is that the most recent piece of kind of intra-party fighting on the right is that Donald Trump took a shot at Ron DeSantis today and surfaced or helped promote, I guess by like retruthing or whatever it is, helped promote some conspiracy theory. Well, actually, it's not a conspiracy theory. He just promoted a picture of Ron DeSantis with a bunch of young students from when he was, I guess, a teacher or something. Ron DeSantis was like 23 years old, and there's a photo of him out there with like a bunch of young students during a party or something like that. And obviously, these students were not legal, and so somebody on Truth Social made some claim about Ron DeSantis, like, I don't know, being at a party with underage kids, and made the argument, some groomer pedophilia argument that is, always prevalent, common on the right, because, if you have a pulse, they'll call you a groomer. But this is a photo of Ron DeSantis with a bunch of like underage kids from like when he was a teacher, I guess. And so Donald Trump was the one to go on Truth Social and help spread that photo. So if you're wondering how things are going on the right, and you know what's ironic about that is that Ron DeSantis, his spokesperson, like Christine Pushaw or whatever her name is, I'm not sure. She blocked me on Twitter because because these people really believe in fighting against censorship and don't want any voices silenced. So she has all these tweets, of course, where she's, castigating people and calling them groomers and pedophiles and this and that. And now she's contending with the person who she works for being called, suggested is a groomer from the former president of the United States, the guy who his career is basically staked on, because if you remember, Ron DeSantis launched his campaign to be the governor of Florida with the most groveling ad where, he talks about Donald Trump. He shows a video of his son like building the wall and says something about Donald Trump where his kid is like building. It is the most groveling, like pathetic suck up of an ad that I've ever seen. But now that guy who Ron DeSantis predicated his career on in Donald Trump is getting attacked by Donald Trump as this intra-party struggle for the 2024 Republican nomination continues to heat up. So it is kind of interesting that when it's like the whole leopard eating faces phenomenon, right? Like Republicans, I guess the DeSantis crew who's out here calling people groomers is now getting accused of being a groomer himself. So I bet he never thought that it would backfire and that he'd be the one fighting back attacks of being a groomer himself. So, but that's how it goes in the Republican Party. The interesting thing, though, is that I guess Ron DeSantis hasn't responded. He likely won't respond. He hasn't responded to any attacks from Donald Trump. And there's two ways to think about it. The first is, why jump into the mud with Donald Trump? Because there's some expression about, jumping into shit with a pig. You're both going to get dirty and the pig likes it. So that's the thing on that end. Like Ron DeSantis has a vested interest in just keeping quiet. But on the flip side, him keeping quiet is just allowing him to kind of continue getting pummeled by Donald Trump, who has no qualms about attacking the guy every chance he gets. He's like leaning in heavily to the Ron DeSanctimonious. Not that I think him calling him Ron DeSanctimonious is going to do anything, but there is a camp, there is, a school of thought about like the more time he has to continue doing his nicknames and laying his attacks down on Ron DeSantis, the more time those attacks actually have to stick. And so they're all going unresponded to. Does that make Ron DeSantis look weak in reference, in relation to Donald Trump, who continues to attack him with no problem? At the same time, maybe Ron DeSantis looks like he's above it all. So I don't know. I mean, there's all ways to like analyze this stuff. At the end of the day, here's what I would say about this whole feud, because I know that, this whole Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis thing is going to continue from here until the end of the earth. But I would say that until and unless Ron DeSantis is actually willing to take a swipe at Donald Trump himself, to actually get up and fight the guy who's fighting him, to fight back, it looks like this is Donald Trump's race to lose. So if you were to ask, like, what's it look like? What's it going to be for 2024 on the Republican side? I would say that until I have any reason to believe otherwise, it's probably going to be Donald Trump. I mean, you have Ron DeSantis, who everybody likes to just anoint the heir apparent in the Republican Party, but the guy hasn't even been willing to stand up and take one single hit at the person who actually is the front runner in the party. And yeah, we'll see different polls that show, Ron DeSantis edging out Trump in this poll, or Trump edging out DeSantis in that poll. At this point, it doesn't even matter. Regardless of whether those polls are accurate or not, it just doesn't matter at this point because so much can happen. But I think that like Ron DeSantis has shown no ability thus far to actually take this fight to Donald Trump. And so until he does, people can pontificate until they're blue in the face, but until he actually does something, there's no reason to believe that something is just going to magically happen. A lot of people in the Republican Party have come at Trump, and people have just decided, like the pundit class has decided that they're going to be the ones to win. But like at the end of the day, no one's been able to take him down in the Republican side. And Ron DeSantis is just one more example of like who the pundit class has anointed the successor. But Ron DeSantis hasn't done anything to actually like embrace that or prove it or bear it out in the slightest. And so, I would imagine that until he does, he's not going to be able to claw away that 35% of Trump supporters who are going to be enough to win him the election, win him the election on the Republican side, win him that primary. It's going to be Trump. It's going to be Nikki Haley and Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis probably and Mike Pompeo and a bunch of, Tom Cotton and all these other clowns, Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. I don't know if I named him. They all just kind of blend together in just this old white puddle. But basically, what you're going to need on that side is pretty much 30% to win, while the rest of them, pull 4%, 9%, 3%, 10, 18%. If you have that 30% majority, just like was the case in 2016, Donald Trump's going to be able to win. So it's a matter of whether Ron DeSantis is going to actually be able to pry that solid majority or plurality, I should say, of the Republican primary electorate away from him. And unless he stands up and does something, I have no reason to believe that he's going to be able to actually do that. So we'll see what happens on the Trump-DeSantis front. But definitely interesting today to basically watch Donald Trump hurl pedophile accusations at Ron DeSantis. Not exactly surprising, because this is the way things go in that party. I mean, like I said before, if you have a pulse, someone's going to accuse you of being a groomer or a pedophile, because that's just how it goes. But to watch the front runner hurl that exact accusation at kind of the person who's nipping at his heels is definitely an interesting, if not surprising, update in the Republican primary. So we'll see what happens on that front. On the other front, we had Mike Pompeo come out, and he's trying to rehab his image as well, writing his book now and pretending that he was some voice of reason in the Republican Party as it related to January 6th. I posted a video, I believe it was yesterday, where Mike Pompeo actually left an interview. He ended an interview with a reporter in the UK, Beth Rigby, who was pressing him on January 6th. And so if you haven't had a chance yet to watch that video, definitely go to my channel and check out that video. It was really great to watch, this guy who clearly just went on because he was doing the rounds, wanted to sell his book. And so whereas he would normally just go on these right-wing channels to promote his book, to speak to them because he wanted to promote his book, I guess he was a little more willing to go other places and kind of didn't do his due diligence and ended up on a network where the reporter was actually willing to push back on him. By the way, it is difficult to get right-wingers to come onto left-wing outlets, and I'm sure vice versa. But, I've tried numerous times to get Republicans to come onto my show. I've gotten 4 in the last 3 years that I've been doing this. Probably the most right was Adam Kinzinger, so that should pretty much tell you everything you need to know about the willingness of conservatives to appear on left of center shows or be challenged whatsoever. So, yeah. When the farthest right is Adam Kinzinger, doesn't exactly bode well for open dialogue between the two parties. I remember there was one time that I reached out to Matt Gaetz's office about an interview, and to his office's credit, he was one of the few that actually even responded to my email, because I've written to Lauren Boebert, I've written to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I've written to a number of Republicans. Matt Gaetz's office wrote back with just screenshots of a bunch of my tweets that were critical of Matt Gaetz. And so basically saying, like, you said mean things about Matt Gaetz, so it's not going to happen. So, that's that censorship argument. They just definitely don't want any voices to be silenced, and that's why they won't do anything unless there is total fealty by the person that's going to appear with their boss. So, needless to say, not going to happen on the Matt Gaetz interview front. There was a part of me that considered going back and deleting a bunch of my old tweets with people, because I know that their offices are going to search Twitter to see if you've been critical of them or not. But I was like, it's impossible to do with Matt Gaetz. I would pretty much have to delete most of my Twitter account if I wanted that to happen. So right now I do want to read an excerpt from what we can expect from the response from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We do have an excerpt from Sarah Huckabee Sanders' Republican response to tonight's State of the Union address. Again, that State of the Union address is about an hour away here, so that's coming up very shortly. I would take this chance to ask, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel and you want to continue to watch live streams for events like this one or interviews. I've interviewed everyone from the president to Jen Psaki, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin. I do those interviews every week. So if you want to watch those interviews or these live streams or just trending news stories, definitely take a second to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. That is the best way to support what I do, and I would very much appreciate it. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so we do have some excerpts from Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response tonight that you'll see at about 10:15 Eastern, so a few hours from now. But she goes on to say, quote, "In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire, but you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race, but not to love one another or our great country." So we'll stop there for a moment. So first of all, radical left's America. Joe Biden is the president. I'm not sure if the whole radical left thing is working. These people don't change their scripts, whether it's Bernie Sanders running or Joe Biden or Joe Manchin. It would always be radical left. It's always going to be socialism. We've had Democratic presidents for 8 years. In 2008, we have Democratic president now. We had 8 years of Bill Clinton before that. They've been crying socialism every single time. We still don't got socialism. So at this point, you just keep crying the same thing over and over and over. You say that if you elect Democrats, you're going to have socialism. We have Democrats. We have Democrats in full control of government. Did you get socialism? No. Did you get an investment of jobs with the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act? Did you have veteran health care? Did you have free COVID tests and vaccines? Did you have most of the population getting vaccinated? Did you have first gun safety bill? Did you have 12.1 million jobs and a 3.4% unemployment rate? You had all of those. You had no socialism. So these people don't change their script regardless of who's in office. But then she says, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. The taxation argument is interesting, an interesting choice, because their only legislative priority was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, which, by the way, polls terribly. It is one of the lowest polling agenda items that you can have. So there is no tax cut for millionaires, for middle-class people. That was the thing that Donald Trump promised would come in 2 weeks, and that was God knows how many years ago. So they're claiming that Washington taxes you. The only thing that Joe Biden's ever proposed is a tax cut for people making over $400,000 a year. So when Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to say Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire, she is talking to a very specific subset of people who make a lot of money. When she's complaining about Washington taxing you, because we know the only people who've even been targeted for higher taxes are making almost $500,000 or more, then it goes to show who their audience is. She's not talking to regular people because regular people aren't being taxed any higher than they were. And in fact, the only people who Democrats have moved to tax even higher, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, are corporations that pay nothing, even though they made over $1 billion in profits. And everybody in this country agrees, like 80% of Americans agree that they should incur higher taxes anyway. There's a 15% corporate minimum tax that was imposed on these companies that were paying zero. But thanks to Democrats, because it'll never happen under Republicans, thanks to Democrats, these companies actually did get taxed. There was also the IRS enforcement, and they're claiming that the IRS is going to have an army of 87,000 people to knock down your doors and empty out your bank accounts. First of all, 87,000 IRS agents is going to happen over the course of 10 years. Most of those people are going to, and they're employees, not agents, most of those people are going to replace the vast majority of IRS employees who are going to be retiring over the next 10 years due to attrition. But second of all, those people, we already know that they're going to be catching ultra-wealthy tax cheats. The enforcement rate for the super rich went from like 20% down to 5%. It's them who benefit from a gutted IRS. The enforcement rate for people making under $75,000 a year went from like 0.3% to 0.1% in terms of audits. So you went from 0.3% of the population getting audited to 0.1% of the population getting audited. But when it was people making over like $10 million a year, it was 20% of them getting audited. Now it's like 5%. So they benefit overwhelmingly from a gutted IRS. And that's why Republicans are so afraid of bolstering IRS funding. It's because they know exactly who is going to get hurt by more IRS enforcement. It's the wealthy tax cheats who benefit from no IRS, from a gutted, underfunded IRS. This is all on purpose, but they frame it in such a way that makes it seem like they're helping you out. But they've done nothing to help regular people, and it's right there in the numbers. The only thing they did during Trump's term was pass a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires and gave crumbs to the middle class. That's why he had to come out and say, we're going to pass a middle class tax cut next. It never happened. But you don't come out and say that you need to pass a middle class tax cut if you already did it, which goes to show that he didn't do it. Because otherwise, why would you need to come out and say, next we're going to do a middle class tax cut? That's how you know this tax cut wasn't geared toward the middle class. It was geared toward the wealthy. They were helping their donors and themselves and Donald Trump and his kids. That's why when you look at the Fair Tax Act, which is what the Republicans want to pass to get rid of income taxes, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, and the inheritance tax. Do you know what the inheritance tax is? The inheritance tax applies to people who make who when they die have fortunes of over $22 million. That's what gets taxed. That's the only people it applies to. It applies to like not many family, like a few hundred families in this country. And so when they come out and they're like, don't worry, real America, we're going to take care of you by getting rid of that inheritance tax that we know that you're all real worried about. Just mom and pop out there, we're gonna protect you by squashing the death tax is what they call it. It applies to like a few hundred families, and they're all millionaires, multi-millionaires. It's crazy that they've convinced people that the inheritance tax, that by eliminating the inheritance tax, that they're actually looking out for real Americans. Okay. Washington taxes you. This is continuation of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' speech. You get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race. So you got the whole slew of Republican Mad Libs here. The whole Republican Mad Lib talking points here. High gas prices. Gas prices have come down $1.70 since their peak. Gas prices are first of all Joe Biden had very little to do with the price of gas, just like any president has very little to do with the price of gas. Gas is sold on a global market. There are a couple of tools that Biden had at his disposal. He used them, including deploying 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And what did Republicans do after seeing that the deployment of a million barrels a day from the SPR worked to get gas prices down? They tried to pass legislation out of the House, which they did out of the House. It won't see the light of day in the Senate, but they passed legislation out of the House blocking the president from being able to use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So they complained about high gas prices. Joe Biden said, well, I can't do much on high gas prices, but I do have this tool available at my disposal. Let's release 1 million barrels per day from the SPR. Republicans saw that worked and said, our first order of business as the House majority is to make sure that the president can't release barrels of oil from the SPR. So and then turn around and complain about the high price of gas. So again, they don't want any of these solutions. They don't want any of these problems to be fixed. They want the problems to persist so that they can campaign on them. That's why they're wailing about high gas prices, watched the price of gas go down, tried to block the solution for it after it was proven to have worked, and then turn around and continue complaining about high gas prices regardless. So that's the gas price thing. The empty grocery shelves is 2 years old, and also rich considering nobody had any toilet paper for 6 months when Trump was president, and these people are complaining about empty grocery shelves. The grocery shelves are completely full. If there are supply chain issues, there are supply chain issues. Do I think that we should repatriate a lot of the industries or a lot of the supply chain elements that are from overseas? Absolutely. I think that'll be much safer. That's what we're doing with the CHIPS Act. We're making sure to build chips here in the United States so that we're not reliant on foreign countries like China to be able to build cars and build other electronics and phones. That's a national security issue. But just for Republicans to complain about empty grocery shelves when people were literally hoarding toilet paper when their guy was in office is just the perfect example of projection and as little self-awareness as you could possibly find. And then finally, Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race. This is the whole critical race theory thing. It's just like a desperate effort to convince people that learning about our history is akin to being racist. Like, learning about a racist history does not make you racist in the same way that learning about the Holocaust doesn't make you anti-Semitic. It just means you've learned about a past event. And that can inform, those past events, learning about them informs what to do or what not to do moving forward. If you saw that the Holocaust happened, if you saw that slavery happened, maybe it's important to learn about it so that you don't repeat history's mistakes. That's why we've always learned about history. And yet now, they equate learning about racism in the past in the United States to this idea that children are just going to internalize it and blame themselves and hate themselves, which is the craziest thing that you could possibly hear. No child living today is going to learn about slavery or the Holocaust or the Civil War or World War II or I or whatever terrible event in history and blame themselves for it. It's just such a backwards, twisted, distorted view of history, all for the express purpose of making sure that they don't have to learn about history because, this is just a nod, a pander to the Republican base, which just kind of is crawling right now with bigots and white supremacists. Like, this is the new frontier of our culture wars now, and so Republicans know that they have to double and triple down on race now moving forward to like really pull in the last remaining vestiges of whatever electorate they can scrounge together so that they can continue winning elections. But they know that they've given up on the whole like diversification of their party issue, and so now it's just going to be, well, we're not going to get those people. We're not going to get we're not going to get women. We're not going to get black people. We're not going to get the LGBT community. We're not going to get Asians. And so instead, we'll just double and triple down on the white people that are here. And if there are white people who haven't voted yet, we'll just try to get those people. And so that's why they're going all in on this whole critical race theory thing. It is as obvious an attempt at appealing to like the basest factions of our society as you could possibly find. I mean, they're banning books in Florida, like Catcher in the Rye. I mean, it really is like when you're banning books, you're not doing it right. We can just say that much. Let me check real quick to see if we have our feed up yet for tonight's event. Okay, so not yet. I'm sure we'll get that feed up soon for the State of the Union. But in the meantime, we'll go on with what we can expect to hear from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So that was the first, that was one snippet from tonight's response. She's going to go on to say, and while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace, but we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. A left-wing culture war that we didn't start and never wanted to fight. This is the party that has gone on and on, from tan suits to Grey Poupon mustard, to M&Ms not being sexy enough, to pronouns, to drag queens, to those pods, to Starbucks Christmas cups, to coffee, to Xboxes, to chocolate milk. These people haven't met a culture war they don't like. And they're saying, you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders who's going to come out tonight and say, we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. If there were no culture wars, Republicans wouldn't have anything to talk about. Fox News wouldn't exist. It would implode into itself. The earth would open up and swallow it whole. There would be nothing. There would be no content if there was no culture wars to fight from Republicans. Every September, October of every election year for my entire life, since I've been alive that I could remember, we talk about migrant caravans and how brown people are coming to replace white people. It's still happening today. You can watch any Fox show on like at any time of the day and hear the exact same bullshit about the great replacement theory or any of this stuff. The idea, like the idea that Republicans are begrudgingly being dragged into culture war fights is so upside down, and I try not to use this word too much because I think it's overused, but like just the most blatant form of gaslighting that you could possibly find. I would challenge a single Republican who purportedly doesn't want to be dragged into a culture war fight to not talk about culture wars for one day, to traffic in reality for one day, to talk about what our job situation looks like in this country, to talk about what the market looks like in this country, to talk about real wage growth in this country, to talk about how inflation's gone down in the last 7 months in this country, to talk about how gas prices have gone down for the last 6 months in this country, to talk about the legislation that's been passed, to talk about any legislation in this country. So that is just a rich statement from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who claims that we just want to live here in freedom and peace, but those evil Marxist Democrats are just dragging us into this left-wing culture war that we didn't start and that we never wanted to fight. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go protect all the M&Ms because the left is canceling them, and my husband thinks the green one is sexy. Just wild. Wild stuff. Okay, let's go on because this is fun. Every day, Sarah Huckabee Sanders will say, we are told that we must partake in their Every day we are told that we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags. I mean, it's what if okay, I'm just going to read it and then I'll talk about it after. Every day we are told that we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols, all while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. First of all, Donald Trump had to go to court because he kept blocking people on Twitter. That's how much they care about freedom of speech. But like this idea that the aggrieved right has to participate in the left's rituals. The evangelicals are upset that they have to participate in the left's ritual. What rituals does the left have? I mean, we are in as close to a theocracy on the right as you could possibly find, where there is literally a stripping away of rights, to an unprecedented degree in this country, and yet we're being told that the right is being is having the left's rituals thrust upon it. Every day in this country is like a day in church. And we're supposed to have freedom of religion in this country. If you're not like adequately loyal to Jesus Christ himself, then you're treated like an enemy of the state as far as Republicans go. But they're complaining that rituals are being thrusted onto them and worship their false idols. There's a clip that I've shown a number of times with Donald Trump being asked to answer what his favorite Bible verse is, just while we're on the subject of worshiping false idols. It comes from the 2016 campaign, and these two interviewers from this like Christian channel or something are asking Donald Trump to name his favorite Bible verse, and he's like, I couldn't possibly do that. It's something that's very personal to me. And they're like, oh well, just what Bible verse do you like? And he's like, I couldn't possibly. It's just very, very important to me. And they're like, well, just any Bible verse that you enjoy. He's like, I couldn't. It's so important and personal to me, and I couldn't possibly. And it goes on for like 2 minutes where this guy refuses to name a Bible verse because he doesn't know any. And like these people are saying that the left is thrusting false idols upon them. The projection is quite entertaining. Quite entertaining. By the way, for people just tuning in, I'm reading excerpts from what we're going to hear from tonight's Republican response from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So that's what I'm reading clips from. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to do the Republican response to tonight's State of the Union address. She's going to come up at about 10:15 Eastern, 7:15 Pacific, and going to claim that the left does a bunch of the stuff that the right does. All while big government, so the last part of that is, all while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. Yeah, I, I don't even know like what American is out there wondering like what's being done about big tech. This is just a Republican official grievance. Like when Republicans don't get enough likes on their tweets because their tweets are garbage, they just claim that big tech is censoring them, and and we already know that there is a ton of deference paid to Republicans on all of these social media platforms because they complain so much, and so they're amplified way more than left of center accounts are amplified. Facebook is basically run by Republicans. Even the company is basically run by Republicans. Uh, all of the big accounts on Facebook are Republican accounts. Elon Musk owns Twitter. Like what platform are Republicans not adequately represented on? I can't log on to Twitter without seeing Ted Cruz, Elon Musk, or Jack Posobiec, or whatever his name is, as the first three tweets. Like this idea that big tech is like some leftist bastion is just so backwards, and also it's a testament to the extent to which Republicans are so out of touch with the people that they actually talk to in this country. Like what people in North Carolina, North Dakota, the Midwest are out there thinking like, man, my life would be so much better if only big tech weren't censoring me. This is just like something that a bunch of Republican politicians say because their tweet didn't get enough likes. That's all it is. But apparently it's important enough for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to include in her speech here. So, you know, that goes to show the priorities that we're dealing with right now. Okay, moving on in Sarah Huckabee Sanders' statement. Let me check if we have a feed yet from the State of the Union. Nope, still no feed yet. But as soon as that feed on in the screen here becomes live, I'll make sure to full screen it so that we can see and hear what's going on. Okay, Sarah Huckabee Sanders will go on tonight to say, quote, Republicans believe in an America where strong families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising, where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. Okay, so an America where strong families thrive in safe communities. You know what's interesting is there was a study released by Third Way this past year that showed that the per capita crime rate is worse in Republican states than it is in Democratic states. And that if you look at Republican cities, if you look at Bakersfield, California, for example, which is the district that Kevin McCarthy represents, it has one of the highest homicide rates in the entire country. Certainly a higher homicide rate than Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, which are the punching bags of the right. But in state after state after state on the Republican side, the most dangerous in this country per capita, on a per capita basis, are actually states that voted for Donald Trump, are red states. So this idea that like only safe communities can occur, you can only have safe communities in Republican states, just is completely undermined by the actual numbers that show that Republican districts, that Republican cities, and that Republican states have higher per capita crime rates than blue states, than blue cities. And that's not to say that all of them are more dangerous, but this study from Third Way definitely shows that the vast majority of high crime states per capita are red. Where jobs are abundant. I mean, she's literally describing what's happened during the Biden administration, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising. That's what Republicans believe in an America where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising. We have 3.4% unemployment in this country right now. That's lower than when Trump was in office. Trump took office from Barack Obama. I think it was 4.7% unemployment. He managed to get it down like just more than a point during his time in office. He got it down 25% from 4.7 to 3.5%. That's all he could manage to do in his time in office. The jobs president, the deal maker president, got it down 25%. And then, of course, COVID hit. He mismanaged the hell out of that, and unemployment shot up. And Joe Biden took office when unemployment was 6.2% and got it down to 3.4%. So he had almost double the unemployment to deal with and got it down even lower than when Trump was in office. He got it down 45% in just 2 years. So this idea that jobs are not abundant in democratic America is so backwards. There has never been since 1933, if you take the average of the Republican presidents and the Democratic presidents, the jobs that were added during Republican administrations is almost like quadruple that of Republican administrations. And since I've been alive, in the last 3.5 decades, there has not been a Republican administration that's created more jobs than a Democratic administration. That's it. Like, I think the last time it happened, maybe I was like 1 or 2. Maybe it was George H.W. Bush. I don't remember how many jobs were created by Bush Sr., but that may be the last administration that actually created more jobs than a Democratic administration. In any case, since I could remember, since I was not a baby, there has not been a Republican administration that's created more jobs, and yet they run on this as if it's true, as if they have some monopoly on the whole concept of job creation, when over and over and over again we see more Democrats create jobs than Republicans, and lower unemployment rates in Democratic administrations than in Republican administrations, and recessions happening in Republican administrations only to be followed by recoveries in Democratic administrations. So again, this is just it's so backwards. It's such blatant gaslighting, but it's not going to stop them from saying it. And because our media ecosystem is completely bifurcated, they know that there's not going to be anybody to fact check them. And so when Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, oh, Republicans are the party of jobs, and there has not been a Republican administration that's created more jobs than a Democratic administration in my lifetime, no one's going to be able to say anything different. Nobody's going to be able to stop her and say, what are you talking about? You know, where paychecks are rising. Again, we've had 6 straight months of rising wages in this country. So it's like this was written at the height of Joe Biden having taken over the pandemic from Biden and never bothered to revise it. Either that, or they just know that there's not going to be any fact check, and so they can just say whatever they want and kind of create this alternate reality where just everything conveniently falls into place for Republicans. And they say Democrats are bad for jobs and Republicans are good for jobs, and they just say it because, like, what's the difference? It's not like they're going to be on. It's not like they're going on CNN or ABC or NBC or my show where we can say, what are you talking about? Give me one instance of proof where a Republican has created more jobs than a Democrat in an administration. No one's stopping them. You think like OAN is going to say, hold on one second. When was the last administration that created more jobs than a Democrat? It's never going to happen. So that's the benefit for Republicans of just like talking into these echo chambers that they live in. Which, by the way, is not to say that Democrats don't also exist in some degree of an echo chamber, but the lies that Republicans allow themselves to tell by virtue of being in these echo chambers is just as egregious as it gets. Okay, for those just tuning in right now, we have a little over a half hour until the State of the Union is set to start. I would ask if you're not yet subscribed to this channel and you want to continue getting these live streams or trending stories that I do every day, or interviews that I do every week, definitely subscribe to this channel. Doesn't cost you anything. That is the single best way to support my work. So just find the subscribe button right here on the screen and hit that button. And this way, when I do other live events, live streams like this one, State of the Union, I'll do them for debates for candidates. I also do trending news stories, maybe 1 or 2 times a day. So if you have like 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes a day, you'll get all the information you need. And I have a new legal series with 30-year former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, and we cover whatever breaking legal news there is. So we're looking at a ton of pending indictments against Donald Trump from Fulton County, Georgia, where he asked Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes that don't exist. We have the Manhattan DA probe with Alvin Bragg for the Stormy Daniels $130,000 hush money payout that Michael Cohen already went to prison for, but it was at the direction of Donald Trump. So presumably Donald Trump would also have some culpability in this. We have the Mar-a-Lago documents case that's being overseen by Jack Smith, the special counsel. We also have the January 6th inciting the insurrection investigation that Jack Smith is looking at right now. So a lot of stuff happening on the legal front. So definitely, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to my channel and want to keep up with all this stuff, definitely hit the subscribe button. All right, that's it for shameless self-promotion right now. Okay, let's finish off with the last excerpt from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is what we're going to hear for anybody just joining right now. This is what we should expect to hear tonight from Sarah Huckabee Sanders' Republican response to the State of the Union. So she said, Republicans believe in an America where families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant, paychecks are rising. We already talked about that. Where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. So now we're talking about the veterans here. This is part of the whole pro-military shtick, even though they were, during January 6th, they had a mob of insurrectionists sicked onto our law enforcement community, and they didn't seem to mind then. Only like a few Republicans even voted for the Medal of Honor in the congressional ceremony for those people. So, this is just the same platitudes that Republicans have been hiding behind forever, that they're pro-police, pro-military, that they're for states' rights, that they're for family values, that they are for fiscal conservatism. But if you look behind all of those things, when you look at family values, I mean, the leader of their party is like a serial adulterer who started his campaign by committing a campaign finance violation of paying porn stars hush money payouts so that his wife, who I believe was at home at the time pregnant with Barron, pregnant with their son, wouldn't know or wouldn't hear in the media that he was out having an affair or affairs. Like that's the family values guy that all these people lined up behind. And even when they found out through the Access Hollywood tape, it clearly didn't matter to just about all of them because they all lined right back up behind him anyway, only to then, start preaching about family values. Fiscal conservatism. I mean, when Trump was president, he added $7.8 trillion to the debt. The only piece of legislation that they actually passed was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires that completely evaporated any federal revenue. So we had a completely lopsided deficit that added a ton of money to the national debt, all because they wanted to just give money back to the donor class. That's it. The bulk, the vast majority of the tax cuts went to the top 1% of Americans. And so then we had no money coming in for federal revenues because that's where that money comes from. And so it completely decimated our deficit and allowed our national debt to balloon. They had set, like I said, almost $8 trillion to the national debt. So this idea that they're for fiscal, and they all voted for it. They all voted for that thing, even though we knew that it was going to add a ton of money to the debt, because they don't care about that. They care about that's a thing that they use when Democrats are in office to block Democrats from being able to pass legislation to fund priorities that are popular, or keep programs that are popular solvent, like food stamps and Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But when they have the opportunity to be fiscally conservative when Republicans are in office, well, they don't do it because it's more important for them to just give themselves a tax break. These people in Congress are all in the top 1%. They're all getting this tax break. This tax break benefits all of them. They know what they're doing. But then when a Democrat comes into office, God forbid they don't, advocate for tightening the belt, because Democrats want to feed people who are hungry or fund education in this country. So that's the fiscal conservatism thing. The whole states' rights argument that Republicans, that whole shtick that they put forward. Remember when they were trying to overturn the election results, Texas put forward a lawsuit that would nullify the election results in Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. That was a Texas lawsuit seeking to nullify election results in 4 completely distinct states because they weren't happy with the way that those states' elections went. So if you still think that Republicans give half a shit about states' rights or the sovereignty of these states, you are kidding yourself. They do not care. Their latest election lawsuit was to nullify results in a bunch of states from another state because they weren't happy with how those state citizens voted. Give me a break on the whole states' rights front. And then, of course, the pro-police, pro-military shtick. Like I said before, I mean, these people couldn't be bothered to defend any police officers, any military members, any law enforcement when their insurrectionists were trying to have them killed. So on January 6th. So again, these are all just talking points that were convenient, that are just convenient things to hide behind. But the moment that it actually comes time in practice to defend any of them, they're nowhere to be found. Why? Because it's easy to just raise these. I mean, they're just platitudes, right? They're cliches. They're easy things to just hide behind, and they're usually never challenged. When a Republican's going to be confronted with a point that they think that they're actually going to have to challenge this concept of states' rights. Another point on states' rights, by the way, is them claiming, oh, we don't when we want to outlaw abortion. When we want to outlaw abortion, we just want it to be left up to the states. What was the first piece of legislation that Republicans introduced after the Obergefell decision? A national ban on abortion. It was introduced almost immediately. So they claim states' rights until the moment that it's not convenient for them to claim states' rights anymore. These are just tired platitudes that they hide behind because they don't think that they're ever going to be challenged. When are they actually going to be challenged on like family values? Before Trump, they were never challenged on family values because it was like they never had a person like that. They never had to do this. They never had to stand up and say, actually, we don't agree with this glaring lack of values, so we're going to abandon you. They haven't had to challenge this notion of states' rights. It's always been just like this convenient platitude that just is there. They haven't had to challenge their pro-police stance. They've never been in a situation where their own supporters were pitted against the police and tried to bludgeon police officers with American flags. And so none of these things happened. They were always just like easy, convenient cliches that they were able to just prop up because like who's going to refute them? But every single one of them got refuted since Trump became president, since they became this like MAGA party. And so now we're left in a situation where it's clear that they don't actually stand for anything. Because if they did stand for anything, they would be able to refute any of these things. They'd be able to like defend any of these things, and they're just silent on all of these topics. Okay, we are less than 30 minutes out. Less than 30 minutes out until State of the Union begins. We've got just over 20 minutes here. I believe that we should be getting this feed pretty soon up in this corner here. So as soon as that goes live, we'll be able to see it, and we'll go full on that. In the meantime, if you are just tuning in, you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button. I'll continue to do these live streams whenever there's anything worth live streaming. Otherwise, I do legal analysis with Glenn Kirshner, who's a former federal prosecutor. I do trending news stories, and I do interviews. And actually heading out to D.C. tomorrow for an interview. So if you want to check out that interview, I'm going to leave you hanging on who it is. But I don't do in-person interviews very often. I think the last in-person interview that I did was, I had a couple recently, but the last time I went to D.C. for an interview was President Biden. So in any case, if you want to check out any of those interviews coming up, just make sure to subscribe to this channel here. On the George Santos front, because that's a fun topic, unless you're a Republican. We now have the latest news on George Santos is that we had a number of his own constituents from his own district in New York's 3rd Congressional District on Long Island come into Congress to demand to speak to him today. He obviously wasn't willing to speak to anybody. Just to keep a running total of what's going on the George Santos front, we know all the lies that George Santos has told, from him pretending that he was Jewish to that he worked at Citibank and Goldman Sachs, that he raised money for a homeless veteran's dog that he ended up not giving him the funds for. But what's happening now is that the DOJ has asked the FEC, the Federal Exchange Commission, to hold off on any enforcement action with regard to his campaign filings. So George Santos had 3 payments totaling about $700,000. I believe one was an $80,000 payment, one was a loan, one was $500,000, and one was $125,000. So just over $700,000 of money that he said that he loaned his own campaign, which already raises some red flags because George Santos was in the news for being wanted in Brazil because he couldn't afford clothing and so had stolen a checkbook. So that's George Santos, which is not to say that somebody can't not have money one day and then have money the next day. But in any case, raise some red flags because everyone's like, where did the money come from? So he said that he had his company, which was called the DeVolder Organization, and he was the sole employee in that company, and so paid dividends to himself and then used that money that he himself, generated and paid himself to loan to his campaign. So, okay, let's just take that at face value. Let's say he loaned himself $700,000. Then it turns out that his campaign finance forms were amended to say that it was not a loan to himself. It was not a personal loan. So what was it? Where did that $700,000 come from? Who paid that $700,000? Did it come from his company? Because a company can't fund a campaign. That would be illegal. Was it some type of a straw donor thing where somebody funneled money through George Santos to pay his campaign? Possibly. That would also be illegal. So we'll find out what the deal is. But what's important here, what's important to note here is that the DOJ has asked the FEC to stand off on enforcement action so that the DOJ can pursue an ongoing criminal case into George Santos. Okay, so our feed is live here, which means we'll be starting momentarily. We have a number of senators filing into the room right now. I mean, you guys can see what's happening. I feel like I don't need to do play-by-play on people walking. Oh, there he is, George Santos in the flesh. So as I was saying, since he's on the screen and we have the opportunity now to put a name to a face, the DOJ has asked the FEC not to go forward with any enforcement action because there's obviously a criminal case that's being opened into George Santos, and so we'll find out where that money came from, where that $700,000 that was initially considered a personal loan and then amended to say that it was not a personal loan, where that money came from. Look, people have been indicted for campaign finance violations before. There's certainly a lot of spotlight on George Santos, and so I think if there's anybody that would have a vested interest in making sure that he is no longer in the House, it's probably Republicans, to be perfectly honest. They'd probably stand to benefit the most because the last thing that they want with their new majority is to be in a situation where everybody sees that they have another liar in this party, and they can't escape this idea that all they have is liars, cheats, and thieves. But it kind of does make sense because, I mean, this is the natural conclusion of Donald Trump taking over that party, is that think about the quality people that you have running as Republicans. If you can't win a Republican primary because you're not Trumpy enough, because those are just the MAGA base of that of our electorate, then think about the kind of people that you're going to draw in. And so, like, this is a problem of their own creation, really. I mean, George Santos is not like an anomaly in that party. He is as overt, egregious an example of exactly what that party is. And he's annoying to Republicans, not because he lies. They all lie. They all cheat and steal. He's annoying because he makes it so obvious, because his stories are so egregious, because he's such a bad liar. He makes it so easy for the rest of us to see exactly who the Republican Party is, and that's the part that they don't like. So let's see if we have any audio here. Just the light din right now of the room. Yes, somebody said Representative Katara. That's right. George Santos, a.k.a. Representative Katara Ravache, who will be doing her drag routine at some point later this evening. That is the second Republican response to tonight's State of the Union address. A death drop by Katara Ravache. somebody somebody else in the chat just wrote, Cinema thinks she's at the Grammys. I haven't seen Kirsten Sinema yet. I haven't been looking, but God knows that she's sporting something, because God forbid she's not the center of attention for 1 minute. Speaking of Kirsten Sinema, I had Ruben Gallego on my show a couple weeks back. He's running against Kirsten Sinema. If she runs, I mean, she's an independent. Ruben Gallego is running as a Democrat in the state of Arizona. So we'll see what happens with that race, and whether Kirsten Sinema does ultimately decide to run as an independent in this next election. Hopefully she sees that there's very little constituency for her on the right or the left. I asked Ruben Gallego what the deal is if she does decide to run, and if he and she both pull support from each other and basically hand that race to a Republican. And he was pretty obstinate in the fact that that it's not going to happen, that polling shows that she doesn't have support in the Democratic Party. But my worry is that even if she has like a few percentage points of support in the Democratic Party beyond what she has in the Republican Party, then that's going to be enough to basically hand a Republican the victory in that state, because these races are so tight. I mean, these races are decided by fractions of a percentage point. And so if Kirsten Sinema is able to act as a spoiler and take just a few percentage points from the Democrat, then that may very well hand the Republican the race. So we'll see what happens on the Kirsten Sinema-Ruben Gallego front. But hopefully Ruben Gallego is able to consolidate that support from Kirsten Sinema that, as we move toward 2024, so that we can actually have a Democrat represent that state, even though it was Democrats that put Kirsten Sinema in power. I'm being told that Sinema is wearing bright yellow, nice and discreet. Makes perfect sense. If I had to guess what color she was wearing, it would be bright yellow. So just as we head into these final few minutes before Biden takes to the lectern, we should expect a number of, just for people joining in right now, I would expect that Biden points to a lot of the accomplishments that Democrats were able to secure over these last 2 years with the slimmest of majorities. I mean, we had the American Rescue Plan, we had the infrastructure bill, we had the gun safety bill for the first time in 30 years, we had the PACT Act, which gave veterans health care, we had the CHIPS Act, which allocated funding for chips and fiber optic cables and just a wave of renewable manufacturing. We had the Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed for a record amount of funding toward combating climate change, and allowed the government to negotiate lower drug prices, capped out-of-pocket costs for seniors at $2,000 a year, capped insulin costs for Medicare recipients at $35 a month, and of course brought added 12.1 million jobs to the economy, brought the unemployment rate down to 3.4%. That's a 54-year low. Last time it was that low was in the 1960s. Black and Hispanic unemployment is down to 5.4% and 4.5% respectively. We've had almost 1 million jobs added in manufacturing. So there is, you don't really have to go for the whole Republican fear-mongering thing when the facts are on your side. I mean, the facts show that this is a strong economy. Republicans have been crying recession to try to manifest that into a reality, but the fact is that it's not a recession if you have the lowest unemployment rate since the 1960s, so wouldn't exactly worry about that. And on the other side, I mean, what do we have? We have Republicans who've been threatening to eliminate earned benefits. They've come out and said we need spending reform, which is their shiny new packaging for entitlement reform, which of course means the elimination of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So even though you've paid into those programs for your entire life, since your very first paycheck, Republicans want to make sure that they can privatize that, because they want to privatize everything from our education system to our Social Security system to our medical system, and kind of do to the healthcare system due to everything else what they've done to our healthcare system, which is, right now that we pay the most and we have some of the worst health outcomes of any industrialized nation. What else are they trying to do? They've been, going on about the Fair Tax Act, which would eliminate income, payroll, inheritance taxes, corporate taxes, and replace everything with a 30% national sales tax, which would be a gift to the wealthy, because instead of the tax burden being placed on the wealthiest Americans who have a disproportionately higher amount of income in this country, the tax burden would be shifted to the working poor in this country, basically. A lot of those people, 40% of Americans, usually, it's a little higher this year because of the pandemic, or in 2022 because of the pandemic, but generally 40% of Americans don't pay income taxes because they don't make enough money. So now, for 40% of Americans, although it's in the 50s this year, for those 50% of Americans who didn't even pay income taxes, those people would be slapped with a 30% premium on everything. I mean, Republicans are out there crying about the cost of eggs. Now everything would be 30% higher if Republicans had their way, from clothing to food to toilet paper, and yes, even including eggs. So this idea that they're out there fighting for you because they keep going on Fox News and complaining about the cost of eggs when they want to impose a 30% tax on everything, which would help the ultra-rich, because instead of incurring a 50% tax, marginal tax by, the highest tax bracket, when you include state and federal, they would just be subjected to a 30% tax. And that's only other things that they buy. If they don't buy that much, if they're just, eating meals, then that's not like being taxed on $10 million of income. So again, a gift to the wealthy on issue after issue after issue. Everything suggested by the Republicans is either trying to strip away something that is monumentally popular, like earned benefits programs or abortion or voting rights, whatever it is, or to impose some extra tax on the middle class by virtue of eliminating those taxes for the donor class, basically. So it's just, same story, different day. Republicans looking out for the ultra wealthy, and Democrats trying to protect programs that people actually enjoy. So that's what I anticipate Biden will be speaking about here. There's plenty for him to talk about in terms of the accomplishments of this last Congress, the 117th Congress, with the slimmest of majorities, what they were able to pass. I anticipate that we'll see him, call for some degree of further cooperation. Will we see it? Probably not. We're going to see these Republicans try to, get their 5-minute cable hits on Fox News by talking about Hunter Biden and, M&Ms and pronouns and the list goes on. It's hard to keep on top of things when the arguments that are being passed off on the right have to do with gas stoves and Democrats purportedly taking away your chocolate milk. So I don't really know what to say about that. But I think it'll be an easy sell for Biden right now. We have one of the strongest economies, most jobs added, lowest unemployment rate that we've had in my lifetime. So I would expect that, it's going to be pretty easy for him to sell the accomplishments that Democrats have made over these last 2 years. And, a big part of why it's important to do that selling is because a lot of people just assume that people in government don't do anything, that nothing changes. But we've seen a ton of change. I mean, we'll see the government's going to be able to negotiate lower drug prices for the first time of our lifetimes. I mean, they haven't been able to do that before. That's been like just a talking point that politicians use, and then it never happens. Democrats did it. They've been able to upgrade our infrastructure, which means we have bridges that we're going to be able to use, that we have ports that we're going to be able to use, that we have rural broadband that's going to go in these areas that are completely forgotten, areas that Republicans do well in. It's going to be a Democratic president who gave them rural broadband. You have Pete out there who's making sure that every single state in this country has money for infrastructure projects, not just blue states. We have veterans who will be able to get health care regardless of their political affiliation. Most of the country got COVID shots that they were able to get for free because of Katie Porter, really. This gun safety bill, vast majority of Americans wanted some type of gun reform. There's elements of gun reform.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark. The gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liu.
Okay, he's going to keep reading names here. I'm going to stop talking and let him take it away. I would just ask, if you're tuning in right now, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. That is the best way to support what I do. I'll continue live streaming events like this. And let's see, he might have stopped talking.
The President of the Senate, at the direction of that body, appoints the following senators as members of the committee on the part of the Senate to escort the President of the United States into the House
Okay,
chamber.
they're going to keep reading names. Anyway, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, would definitely appreciate you subscribing. I'll do live streams like this, breaking news videos, interviews, legal analysis. So definitely hit the subscribe button.
Ms. Stapadow. The Senator from Minnesota, Ms. Klobuchar. The Senator from Wisconsin, Ms. Baldwin. There she is. The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell. The Senator from South Dakota, Mr. Thune. The Senator from Wyoming, Mr. Barrasso. The Senator from West Virginia, Ms. Capito. The Senator from Iowa, Ms. Ernst. The Senator from Montana, Mr. Daines.
The members of the escort committee will exit the chamber through the lobby doors.
That is quite the din of noise from that chamber there. So I'll lower that a bit for the moment. Okay, and we are less than 10 minutes away from this speech starting. So don't go anywhere. Oh God, I think that's Kyrsten Sinema in the bright yellow dress. Exactly as subtle. I guess she didn't want to make sure that, she wanted to make sure that Mitch McConnell wouldn't miss her. A lot of geriatric Republicans with their failing eyesight got to make sure that they don't miss Kyrsten Sinema.
Mr. Speaker, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps.
Okay, a lot of starts and stops today. But we are just a few minutes away from Biden taking to the lectern. So they'll do waves of people that come in, it's a whole thing, and they'll stop. Waves more people, then they'll stop. But we should expect that Biden should be up there within 5 minutes.
House mandates
Mr. Speaker, the Chief Justice and Associate Justices of the Supreme Court.
I will reserve my comments on the Supreme Court's entrance. Just leave it at that. The next wave of people. It's going to be Jill Biden.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet. There was reporting earlier today that Marjorie Taylor Greene was going to try to get into the State of the Union with a big white balloon. And the best part of that is there was a quote from Kevin McCarthy today, and he said, quote, "We're members of Congress. We have a code of ethics of how we should portray ourselves. That's exactly what we'll do. We're not going to be doing childish games." And the very next thing that happened today was that Marjorie Taylor Greene videotaped herself walking around with a big white balloon. Just like the juxtaposition was perfect. So something tells me that she's not going to be able to bring this big white balloon in. But then again, I mean, she runs that party, not Kevin McCarthy, so at the end of the day, she does what she wants, and Kevin McCarthy just grins and bears it. Okay, we are seconds away from Joe Biden entering the chamber here. It is pretty remarkable to watch the C-SPAN cameras just find the people that, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and actually I don't think they found Marjorie Taylor Greene, but Kyrsten Sinema and George Santos, just like exactly the people we love to hate. Those eagle-eyed camera operators at C-SPAN. I believe the next person to enter the chamber is going to be Joe Biden, and then we'll get this thing going. It is 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. We should expect the Republican response at about 10:15 Eastern, 7:15 Pacific. And again, if you're just tuning in, or if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. That is the best way to support what I do. I'll do live streams like this. I'll do trending stories, interviews, legal analysis with Glenn Kirshner. So definitely hit the subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed. That's a great way to help me, help my channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and I'd appreciate it. We are seconds away here. Okay, looks like we're ready to go.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you. You can smile. It's okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
He tells Republicans you can smile, it's
Thank you.
okay.
Please. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, good to see you guys up there. Members of Congress. By the way, Chief Justice, I may need a court order. She gets to go to the game tomorrow, next week. I have to stay home. Got to work something out here. Members of the Cabinet, leaders of our military, Chief Justice, Associate Justice, and retired Justice of the Supreme Court, and to you, my fellow Americans. You know, I start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you. And I want to congratulate the new leader of the House Democrats, the first African-American minority leader in history, Hakeem Jeffries. He won in spite of the fact I campaigned for him. Congratulations to the longest-serving leader in the history of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Where are you, Mitch? And congratulations to Chuck Schumer, another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think you. Only this time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader. You're the majority leader. About that much bigger? Yeah. Well, I tell you what. I want to give special recognition to someone who I think is going to be considered the greatest speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Folks, the story of America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years, because of you all, because of the American people. 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threats in the Civil War. And today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken.
Notice how McCarthy doesn't stand for that line.
As we gather here tonight, We're writing the next chapter in the great American story, a story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I say I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. You came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact, it was important. And in fact, I signed over 300 bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president, from reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. And to my Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. I think folks, you all are as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out in not one administration, but for a long time. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs moved overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities and towns that many of you represent became shadows of what they used to be. And along the way, something else we lost: pride, our sense of self-worth. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. I know a lot of you always kid me for always quoting my dad, but my dad used to say, "Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck." He really would say this. It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, "Honey, it's going to be okay," and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results. We're not finished yet by any stretch of the imagination, but unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low. A near record unemployment.
Interesting how no Republicans are applauding for jobs.
Near record unemployment for Black and Hispanic workers. We've already created, your help, 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years. And where is it written? Where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And I don't know where that's written. For too many decades, we imported projects and exported jobs. Now, thanks to what you've all done, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Folks, inflation has been a global problem because the pandemic disrupted our supply chains, and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million. And by the way, every time someone starts a small business is an act of hope. And Madam Vice President, I want to thank you for leading that effort to ensure that small businesses have access to capital and the historic laws we enacted that are going to just come into being. Standing here last year, I shared with you a story of American genius and possibilities. Semiconductors, small computer chips the size of a fingerprint that power everything, from cell phones to automobiles and so much more. These chips were invented in America. Let's get that straight. They were invented in America. We used to make 40% of the world's chips. In the last several decades, we lost our edge. We're down to only producing 10%. We all saw what happened during the pandemic when chip factories shut down overseas. Today's automobiles need 3,000 chips, each of those automobiles. But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up, people got laid off, so did everything from refrigerators to cell phones. We can never let that happen again. That's why we came together to pass the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. Folks, I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'm not changing my view. We're going to make sure the supply chain for America begins in America. The supply chain begins in America. We've already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories. Jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree. Jobs. Because we work together, these jobs where people don't have to leave home to search for opportunity. And it's just getting started. Think about the new homes, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses. So much more that's going to be needed to support those 3,000 permanent jobs and the factories that are going to be built. Talk to mayors and governors, Democrats and Republicans, and they'll tell you what this means for their communities. We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks, as you all know, we used to be #1 in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system. And folks, already we've funded over 20,000 projects, including major airports from Boston to Atlanta to Portland, Projects that are going to put thousands of people to work rebuilding our highways, our bridges, our railroads, our tunnels, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet, all across America. Urban, rural, tribal. And folks, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. And I mean it sincerely. I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law, and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking. Look, this law will further unite all of America. Projects like Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky over the Ohio River, built 60 years ago, badly needed repairs, one of the nation's most congested freight routes, carrying $2 billion worth of freight every single day across the Ohio River. And folks, I've been talking about fixing it for decades, but we're really finally going to get it done. Yes. I went there last month with Democrats and Republicans, and from both states, to deliver a commitment of $1.6 billion for this project. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Sarah, who's here tonight. I don't know where Sarah is. Is she up in the box? I don't know. Sarah, how are you? Well, Sarah, for 30 years, I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. The folks who built Cincinnati's skyline. Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her. That's pride. And that's what we're also building. We're building back pride. Look, we're also replacing poisonous lead pipes that go into 10 million homes in America, 400,000 school and child care centers. So every child in America can drink the water instead of having permanent damage to their brain. Look, we're making sure that every community in America has access to affordable high-speed internet. No parent should have to drive by McDonald's parking lot to help them do their homework online with their kids, which many thousands were doing across the country. And when we do these projects, and again I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it, we're going to buy American. We're going to buy America. Folks, and it's totally consistent with international trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933, but for too long, past administrations, Democrat and Republican, have not anymore. Tonight, I'm announcing new standards that require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. Made in America. I mean it. Lumber, glass, drywall, fiber optic cable. And on my watch, American roads, bridges, and American highways are going to be made with American products as well. Folks, my economic plan is about investing in places and people that have been forgotten. So many of you listening to me tonight, I know you feel it. So many of you felt like you've just simply been forgotten. Amid the economic upheaval of the past 4 decades, too many people have been left behind and treated like they're invisible. Maybe that's you watching from home. Remember the jobs that went away. You remember them, don't you? The folks at home remember them. You wonder whether the path even exists anymore for your children to get ahead without having to move away. Well, that's why I get that. That's why we're building an economy where no one's left behind. Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back because choices we made in the last several years. You know, this is, in my view, a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America and make a real difference in your lives at home. For example, too many of you lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's name happens if your spouse gets cancer, or your child gets deadly ill, or something happens to you. What are you going to get money to pay for those medical bills? Or are you going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it? I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring health care costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. The guy who invented it didn't even patent it because he wanted it to be available for everyone. It cost the drug companies roughly $10 a vial to make that insulin. Packaging and all, you may get up to $13. But Big Pharma has been unfairly charging people hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 a month, making record profits. Not anymore. Not anymore. So many things that we did are only now coming to fruition. We said we were doing this, and we said we passed the law to do it, but people didn't know because the law didn't take effect until January 1 of this year. We capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. People are just finding out. I'm sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting. Look, there are millions of other Americans who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes and need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35. Folks, and Big Pharma's still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you they're going to do very well. This law also caps and won't even go into effect.
He says it's a Republican.
Until 2025. Costs, out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 a year. You don't have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much your drug costs are. Because you know why? You all know it. Many of you, like many in my family, have cancer. You know the drugs can range from $10,000, $11,000, $14,000, $15,000 for the cancer drugs. If drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies are going to have to pay Medicare back the difference. We're finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save seniors money, it cuts the federal deficit by billions of dollars, by hundreds of billions of dollars. Because these prescription drugs are drugs purchased by Medicare to keep their commitment to the seniors. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, you're paying $15. That's a lot of savings for the federal government. And by the way, why wouldn't we want that? Now, some members here are threatening, and I know it's not an official party position, so I'm going to exaggerate, but threatening to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. As my coach, that's okay, that's fair. As my football coach used to say, lots of luck in your senior year. Make no mistake, if you try anything to raise the cost of precision jobs, I will veto it. Look, I'm pleased to say that more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. A record 16 million people are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And thanks to the law I signed last year, saving millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. So my plea to some of you, at least in this audience, let's finish the job and make these savings permanent. Expand coverage of Medicaid. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world to a clean energy future. I visited the devastating aftermath of record floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires from Arizona to Mexico to all the way up to the Canadian border. More timber has been burned, as I've observed from helicopters, than the entire state of Missouri. And we don't have global warming? Not a problem. In addition to emergency recovery, from Puerto Rico to Florida to Idaho, we're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind. We're going to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations installed across the country by tens of thousands of IBEW workers. And we're helping families save more than $1,000 a year with tax credits to purchase electric vehicles and efficient appliances, energy-efficient appliances. Historic conservation efforts to be responsible stewards of our land. Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America, at last, is stepping up to the challenge. We're still going to need oil and gas for a while. But guess what? No, we do. But there's so much more to do. We got to finish the job. And we pay for these investments.
These Republicans are like, gas, gas.
The wealthiest and biggest corporations began to pay their fair share. Just began. Look, I'm a capitalist, but pay your fair share. I think a lot of you at home agree with me and many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair. Look, the idea that in 2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. God love them. 15%. That's less than a nurse pays. And let me be crystal clear. I said at the very beginning, under my plans, as long as I'm president, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes. Nobody, not one penny. But let's finish the job. There's more to do. We have to reward work, not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax. You know, there's 1,000 billionaires in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter. about it. I mean, look. I know you aren't enthusiastic about that, but think about it. Think about it. Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade, and that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding their CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments. They'll still make considerable profit. Let's finish the job and close the loophole to allow very wealthy to avoid paying their taxes. Instead of cutting the number of audits for wealthy taxpayers, I just signed a law to reduce the deficit by $114 billion by cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. That's being fiscally responsible. In the last 2 years, my administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion, the largest deficit reduction in American history. Under the previous administration, the American deficit went up 4 years in a row. Because those record deficits, no president added more to the national debt in any 4 years than my predecessor. Nearly 25% of the entire national debt that took over 200 years to accumulate was added by just one administration alone, the last one. They're the facts. Check it out. Check it out. How did Congress respond to that debt? They did the right thing. They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis. They paid American bills to prevent an economic disaster in the country. So tonight I'm asking the Congress to follow suit. Let's commit here tonight to the full faith and credit of the United States of America will never, ever be questioned. Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote.
Oh, we got Cruella de Vil in the back here.
I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be stopped. All right. I'm ready. We got unanimity.
Smart. He's making them stand and own it right here. That's funny.
Social Security and Medicare are a lifeline for millions of seniors. Americans have to pay into them from the very first paycheck they started. So tonight, let's all agree, and we apparently are, let's stand up for seniors. Stand up and show them. We will not cut Social Security. We will not cut Medicare. Those benefits belong to the American people. They earned it. And if anyone tries to cut Social Security, which apparently no one's going to do, and if anyone tries to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I'll veto it. And look, I'm not going to allow them to be taken away. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But apparently it's not going to be a problem. Next month, when I offer my fiscal plan, I ask my Republican friends to lay down their plan as well. I really mean it. Let's sit down together and discuss our mutual plans together. Let's do that. I can tell you, the plan I'm going to show you is going to cut the deficit by another $2 trillion. And it won't cut a single bit of Medicare or Social Security. In fact, we're going to extend the Medicare Trust Fund at least 2 decades, because that's going to be the next argument. How do we keep it solvent, right? Well, we'll not raise tax on anyone making under 400 grand, but we'll pay for it the way we talked about tonight, by making sure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share. Look. Here's the deal. They aren't just taking advantage of the tax code. They're taking advantage of you, the American consumer. Here's my message to all of you out there. I have your back. We're already preventing Americans from receiving surprise medical bills, stopping $1 billion surprise bills per month so far. We're protecting seniors' life savings by cracking down on nursing homes that commit fraud, endanger patient safety, prescribe drugs that are not needed. Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars because they can finally get a hearing aid over the counter without a prescription. Look, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's extortion. It's exploitation. Last year, I cracked down with the help of many of you on foreign shipping companies that were making you pay higher prices for every good coming into the country. I signed a bipartisan bill to cut shipping costs by 90%, helping American farmers, businessmen, and consumers. Let's finish the job. Pass the bipartisan legislation to strengthen antitrust enforcement and prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage. My administration is also taking on junk fees, those hidden surcharges too many companies use to make you pay more. For example, we're making airlines show you the full ticket price up front, refund your money if your flight is canceled or delayed. We've reduced exorbitant bank overdrafts by saving consumers more than $1 billion a year. We're cutting credit card late fees by 75%, from $30 to $8. Look, junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most other folks in homes like the one I grew up in, like many of you did. They add up to hundreds of dollars a month. They make it harder for you to pay your bills or afford that family trip. I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts. The idea that cable, internet, and cell phone companies can charge you $200 or more if you decide to switch to another provider. Give me a break. We can stop service fees on tickets to concerts and sporting events and make companies disclose all the fees up front. And we'll prohibit airlines from charging $50 round trip for a family just to be able to sit together. Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage. Americans are tired of being. We're tired of being played for suckers. So pass the Junk-Free Prevention Act so companies stop ripping us off. For too long, workers have been getting stiffed, but not anymore. We're beginning to restore the dignity of work. For example, I should have known this, but I didn't until 2 years ago. 30 million workers have to sign non-compete agreements for the jobs they take. 30 million. So a cashier at a burger place can't walk across town and take the same job at another burger place and make a few bucks more. It just changed. But they just changed it because we exposed it. That was part of the deal, guys. Look it up. But not anymore. We're banning those agreements so companies have to compete for workers and pay them what they're worth. And I must tell you, this is bound to get a response from my friends on my left but the right. I'm so sick and tired of companies breaking the law by preventing workers from organizing. Pass the PRO Act, because business have a right, workers have a right to form a union. And let's guarantee all workers have a living wage. Let's make sure working parents can afford to raise a family with sick days, paid family medical leave, affordable child care. That's going to enable millions of more people to go and stay at work. And let's restore the full child tax credit, which gave tens of millions of parents some breathing room and cut child poverty in half to the lowest level in history. And by the way, when we do all these things, we increase productivity. We increase economic growth. So let's finish the job and get more families access to affordable, quality housing. Let's get seniors who want to stay in their homes the care they need to do so. Let's give more breathing room to millions of family caregivers looking after their loved ones. Pass my plan so we get seniors and people with disabilities the home care and services they need. And support the workers who are doing God's work. These plans are fully paid for and we can afford to do them. Restoring the dignity of work means making education an affordable ticket to the middle class. You know, when we made public education, 12 years of it, universal in the last century, we made the best educated, best paid, we became the best educated, best paid nation in the world. But the rest of the world's caught up. It's caught up. Jill, my wife, who teaches full time, has an expression. I hope I get it right, kid. Any nation that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Any nation that out-educates is going to out-compete us. Folks, we all know 12 years of education is not enough to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We want to have the best educated workforce. Let's finish the job by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. Studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school and go on to earn a 2 or 4 year degree, no matter their background they came from. Let's give public school teachers a raise. We're making progress by reducing student debt, increasing Pell Grants for working and middle-class families. Let's finish the job and connect students to career opportunities starting in high school. Provide access to 2 years of community college, the best career training in America, in addition to being a pathway to a 4-year degree. Let's offer every American a path to a good career, whether they go to college or not. And folks, in the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed and we were shutting down everything, let's recognize how far we came in the fight against the pandemic itself. While the virus is not gone, thanks to the resilience of the American people and the ingenuity of medicine, we've broken the COVID grip on us. COVID deaths are down by 90%. We've saved millions of lives and opened up our country. We opened our country back up, and soon we'll end the public health emergency. But that's called a public health emergency. But we'll remember the toll and pain that's never going to go away. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to COVID. 1 million. Families grieving, children orphaned, empty chairs at the dining room table constantly reminding you that she used to sit there. Remembering them, we remain vigilant. We still need to monitor dozens of variants and support new vaccines and treatments. So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses afloat. Before I came to office, you remember, during that campaign, the big issue was about inspector generals who would protect taxpayers' dollars who were sidelined. They were fired. Many people said we don't need them. And fraud became rampant. Last year, I told you the watchdogs are back. Since then, we've recovered billions of taxpayers' dollars. Now let's triple the anti-fraud strike force going after these criminals, double the statute of limitations on these crimes, and crack down on identity fraud by criminal syndicates stealing billions of dollars from the American people. And the data shows that for every dollar we put into fighting fraud, the taxpayers get back at least 10 times as much. It matters. It matters. Look, COVID left its scars, like the spike in violent crime in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. We have an obligation to make sure all people are safe. Public safety depends on public trust, as all of us know. But too often that trust is violated. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome. We had to bury Tyree last week. As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her. When I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. With the faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and character that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there. Our children have a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. We know police officers put their lives on the line every single night and day. And we know we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them. I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But they risk their lives every time they put that shield on. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe. We also need more first responders and professionals to address the growing mental health, substance abuse challenges. More resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime. More community intervention programs. More investment in housing, education, and job training. All this can help prevent violence in the first place. And when police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable. With the support of the families of victims, civil rights groups, and law enforcement, I signed an executive order for all federal officers, banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, and other key elements of the George Floyd Act. Let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyler's mom true. Something good must come from this. Something good. And all of us, folks, it's difficult, but it's simple. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do something. That was the plea of parents who lost their children in Uvalde. I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did. Passing the most sweeping gun safety law in 3 decades. That includes things like that the majority of responsible gun owners already support. Enhanced background checks for 18 to 21 years old. Red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and others. But we know our work is not done. Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side. His mom's side when she was dying from cancer. And Brandon now works at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. In 10 years, that ban was law and mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. And let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. We now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months. We've launched a new border plan last month. Unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has come down 97% as a consequence of that. But American border problems won't be fixed until Congress acts. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border. And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms. Congress must restore the right and the Congress must restore the right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect Roe v. Wade. Give every woman a consular right. The Vice President and I are doing everything to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. But already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example. Let's remember the world's watching. I spoke in this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. A murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity. 1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did. And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're once again joined by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, we're united in our support of your country. Will you stand so we can all take a look at you? Thank you. Because we're going to stand with you as long as it takes. Our nation is working for more freedom, more dignity, more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere. Before I came to office, the story was about how the People's Republic of China was increasing its power and America was failing in the world. Not anymore. We made clear, and I made clear in my personal conversations, which have been many, with President Xi, that we seek competition, not conflict. But I will make no apologies that we're investing to make America stronger, investing in American innovation and industries that will define the future that China intends to be dominated, investing in our alliances and working with our allies to protect advanced technologies so they will not be used against us, modernizing our military to safeguard stability and deter aggression. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world. And I'm committed. I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did. Look, let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more, and doing more. Look, the bridges we're forming between partners in the Pacific and those in the Atlantic, and those who bet against America are learning how wrong they are. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Well, when I came to office, most assured that bipartisanship assumed was impossible, but never believed it. That's why a year ago I offered a unity agenda to the nation as I stood here. We made real progress together. We passed a law making it easy for doctors to prescribe effective treatments for opioid addiction. We passed the gun safety law, making historic investments in mental health. We launched the ARPA-H drive for breakthrough in the fights against cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, and so much more. We passed the Heath Robinson PACT Act, named after the late Iraq War veteran whose story about exposure to toxic burn kits I shared here last year. I understand something about those burn pits, but there's so much more to do. We can do it together. Joining us tonight is a father named Doug from Newton, New Hampshire. He wrote Jill, my wife, a letter, and me as well, about his courageous daughter, Courtney. A contagious laugh, his sister's best friend, her sister's best friend. He shared a story all too familiar to millions of Americans and many of you in the audience. Courtney discovered pills in high school. It spiraled into addiction and eventually death from a fentanyl overdose. She was just 20 years old. Describing the last 8 years without her, Doug said, "There's no worse pain." Yet their family has turned pain to purpose, working to end the stigma and change laws. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Doug, we're with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. Big, you got it. So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking, with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Second, let's do more on mental health, especially for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we owe them greater access to mental health care at their schools. We must finally hold social media companies accountable for experimenting they're doing running children for profit. It's time to pass bipartisan legislation to stop big tech from collecting personal data on our kids and teenagers online. Ban targeted advertising to children and impose stricter limits on the personal data that companies collect on all of us. Third, let's do more to keep this nation's one truly sacred obligation to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home. job training, job placement for veterans and their spouses as they come to return to civilian life, helping veterans afford the rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served the country. Dennis McDonough is here of the VA. We had a first real discussion when I asked him to take the job. I'm glad he did. We were losing up to 25 veterans a day on suicide. Now we're losing 17 a day to the silent scourge of suicide. 17 veterans a day are committing suicide. More than all the people being killed in the wars. Folks, VA is doing everything it can, including expanding mental health screening, proven programs that recruits veterans to help other veterans understand what they're going through, get them the help they need. We got to do more. And fourth, last year, Jill and I reignited the cancer moonshot that I was able to start with President Obama asked me to lead our administration on this issue. Our goal is to cut the cancer death rates at least by 50% in the next 25 years. Turn more cancers from death sentences to treatable diseases. Provide more support for patients and their families. It's personal to so many of us in this audience. Joining us are Morris and Candice, an Irishman and a daughter of immigrants from Panama. They met and fell in love in New York City and got married in the same chapel Jill and I got married in New York City. Kindred spirits. He wrote us a letter about his little daughter, Ava, and I saw her just before I came over. She was just a year old when she was diagnosed with rare kidney disease, cancer. After 26 blood transfusions, 11 rounds of radiation, 8 rounds of chemo, 1 kidney removed, giving a 5% survival rate. He wrote how in the darkest moments he thought, if she goes, I can't stay. Many of you have been through that as well. Jill and I understand that like so many of you. And he read Jill's book describing our family's cancer journey and how we tried to steal moments of joy where we could with Bo. For them, that glimmer of joy was the half smile of their baby girl. It meant everything to them. They never gave up hope. Little Ava never gave up hope. She turns 4 next month. They just found out Ava's beating the odds, is on her way to being cured of cancer. And she's watching from the White House tonight if she's not asleep already. For the lives we can save, for the lives we can save and the lives we've lost, let this be a truly American moment that rallies the country and the world together and proves that we can still do big things. 20 years ago, under the leadership of President Bush and countless advocates and champions, he undertook a bipartisan effort through PEPFAR to transform the global fight against HIV/AIDS. It's been a huge success. He thought big. He thought large. He moved. I believe we can do the same thing with cancer. Let's end cancer as we know it. Cure some cancers once and for all. Folks, there's one reason why we've been able to do all of these things. Our democracy itself. It's the most fundamental thing of all. With democracy, everything's possible. Without it, nothing is. For the last few years, our democracy has been threatened and attacked, put at risk, put to the test in this very room on January the 6th. And then just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie assailed and unleashed a political violence, the home of the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th. Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and as strong, as resilient as they get. my friend Paul Pelosi. Paul, stand up. But such a heinous act should have never happened. We must all speak out. There's no place for political violence in America. We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fundamental right. Honor the results of our elections, not subvert the will of the people. We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor. Democracy must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it. And this is our moment. My fellow Americans, we meet tonight at an inflection point, one of those moments that only a few generations ever face, where the direction we now take is going to decide the course of this nation for decades to come. We're not bystanders of history. We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best, optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking, a nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos. We have to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. We're good people. The only nation in the world built on an idea, the only one. Other nations are defined by geography, ethnicity, but we're the only nation based on an idea that all of us, every one of us, is created equal in the image of God. A nation that stands as a beacon to the world. A nation in a new age of possibilities. So I've come to fulfill my constitutional obligation to report in the State of the Union. And here's my report. Because the soul of this nation is strong, because the backbone of this nation is strong, because the people of this nation are strong, the State of the Union is strong. I'm not new to this place. I stand here tonight having served as long as about any one of you have ever served here. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Well, that was a home run. That was a phenomenal speech. Super high energy, as opposed to Kevin McCarthy. Sleepy Kevin back there. Biden hit on a ton of really great points, really popular points. I'm going to look for the Republican response as I do this so that we can hear that as well. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to be delivering the Republican response, so stick around to hear that. But just a few points that I want to bring up. First of all,
and we'll work backwards a little bit, but on this idea that fentanyl, and there were some Republicans who were screaming at Biden, you caused this. First of all, fentanyl seizures spiked under Trump. They've gone down pretty much every month since mid-2020. So this idea that this is just a problem under Joe Biden and that it's not gotten better every single month is just completely devoid of any basis in reality. And beyond that, the vast majority of fentanyl smuggled into the U.S. is by American citizens, not by illegal immigrants. I know that this is like Republican Mad Libs, that they get to point to illegal immigration and fentanyl as if those are the causes of all their problems, but the majority of fentanyl seizures are done by American citizens, not the mythical evil immigrant that Republicans love to point to. So that's just working our way backwards a little bit. You saw a number of times where Biden was calling just for simple calls to keep drug prices low, better jobs, better infrastructure, and Republicans stayed seated because I guess that's just putting their priorities on display as well as they could. There was one moment where Biden said, quote, "Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the rights of people to live free from tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy?" Kevin McCarthy stayed seated. Just like some of these instances of imagery that we got tonight were just pretty spectacular. There was another really telling moment. And that was that Biden smartly had Republicans basically stand up and own this newfound protectionism for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So Republicans are trying to claim now that they were never for entitlement reform, even though Mitch McConnell is on record calling for an elimination of earned benefits. We have Ron Johnson, who's called for moving funding moving all funding to discretionary so that they'd be able to better tackle, better take away entitlements, or what they're calling entitlements, earned benefits. We have Lindsey Graham, who's been on record saying that we need to do something about entitlements. There are a number. Rick Scott had his legislation to sunset all federal legislation after 5 years. That would obviously be so that they wouldn't be able to renew earned benefits of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So there are a number of Republicans on record, but now they're pretending, now the new party line is that they're pretending that they were never for undoing earned benefits. And so Biden said, okay, great. He said, first of all, he goes, I love conversion. So he was saying, look, if you're for it now, that's totally fine. I'm happy to have brought you over to the other side. I welcome conversion, he says. But he smartly made them stand up and basically own their newfound position of protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I thought that was pretty incredible because he basically unilaterally ended the Republican Party's effort to cut those earned benefits in about 2 minutes on national television. And so now Republicans have to give it up because all these guys just stood and applauded because Biden had them do that. He said, who's for, protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid? And everybody had to stand up because if you didn't, then it would look like you're for eliminating it. And so he basically just neutered that part of their arsenal. Like the guy unilaterally protected Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the national stage in this speech through like a back and forth with Republicans who were shouting out. I mean, we had Marjorie Taylor Greene basically hollering throughout the entirety of this speech. Let me check real quick to see if we can get... Doesn't look like we have Sarah Huckabee Sanders yet. So as soon as we have that, we'll start to play it. But we should have Sarah Huckabee Sanders momentarily. By the way, before I keep going, one way to support what I do is just to follow this channel. So if you enjoyed this live stream and my preamble and this post analysis right now, please consider subscribing to this channel. That's the best way to support what I do. It's free, doesn't cost anything, but it is it's super helpful for me. So please hit the subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed to this channel. Okay, continuing to work back. Biden also called for banning assault weapons, which is huge. He said, quote, "Ban assault weapons now, ban them now. I led the fight to ban them in 1994. In the 10 years the ban was law, mass shootings went down. After Republicans let it expire, mass shootings tripled." So again, like, this wasn't him, like, pussyfooting around these issues, like these progressive issues. Although I don't even know if that's, like, progressive. I think it's just normal. I mean, this is not even something that just the left would agree with. I don't think anybody is for these super lax gun policies that have allowed mass shootings to kind of explode in this country. Biden also called for for Congress to restore the rights taken away when the Supreme Court overturned Roe. He said, quote, Congress must restore the right the Supreme Court took away last year and codify Roe v. Wade to protect every woman's constitutional right to choose. I believe Kyrsten Sinema stood up and applauded for that line, which is ironic because the only reason that Roe isn't codified right now is because the filibuster was left intact in the last Congress by two Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Had Sinema deigned to allow us to change a procedural rule that is not in the Constitution, Roe v. Wade would be the law of the land right now. So just ironic, but I guess she's there for her true priority, which is protecting an archaic procedural tool and not the constituents she was elected to serve. So Biden then went on and said, make no mistake about it, if Congress passes a national abortion ban, I will veto it. So another good move by Biden with regard to abortion. Then there was the economic stuff. The economic stuff took up probably the first half of the speech. That was his biggest biggest focus in this speech. And that was, he said, for example, in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal income taxes. That's simply not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. So he's talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. Again, having billion-dollar companies pay a minimum corporate rate of 15% is wildly popular in this country. And it's also something that Republicans are threatening to overturn by virtue of threatening to overturn the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's not all. It's also that they would undermine or undo funding for climate change and also like overturn super popular provisions like allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices. Biden said in this speech, the U.S. pays the most for prescription drugs than any other industrialized country in the world, any other one on the planet. And yet, that bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, that law rather, for the first time ever, will allow the government to negotiate lower drug prices. So it starts, I believe, in 2025, where they can negotiate 10, and then that'll ramp up to 20. I spoke with Bernie Sanders about this in my last interview with him a couple weeks back, and basically asked, like, why can't we expedite this process to, like, get this moving? Why set some arbitrary timeline of, like, it has to be done in 2025? We can do it sooner. And Bernie Sanders basically said we have a bill to do exactly that. Whether Republicans are going to vote for something like that, I think we all have the answer to that. But in any case, there is a bill to do exactly that. But regardless, even if there isn't a bill to expedite it, we can't forget the fact that it's already in motion right now, and that's something that Republicans are threatening to undermine by virtue of threatening to overturn the Inflation Reduction Act, along with other provisions like capping out-of-pocket costs for seniors at $2,000 a year, capping insulin costs at $35 a month for Medicare recipients. Biden also called to allow all people to have capped insulin costs at $35 a month. Right now, because they did it through reconciliation, they're only allowed to impact spending that's affected by basically anything related to the tax code. So Medicare is paid for through that way, and so they were able to do it for Medicare recipients, but not Americans as a whole. So that bill would allow Americans as a whole, to have insulin costs capped at $35 a month. Moving on. By the way, on that, these threats to overturn the Inflation Reduction Act, and some of these Republicans cheered, by the way, when he mentioned overturning the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden says, as my coach used to say, my football coach used to say, lots of luck in your senior year, meaning you do this at your own peril. Biden was attacking Big Pharma, especially when he was talking about the cost of insulin, and he had to turn around and reassure Republicans, Big Pharma's still going to do well, I promise you. Like, go and reassure Republicans, don't worry, Big Pharma's going to be okay.
You guys are going to be okay.
Oh, is that right? All right.
Thank you for what you talked about around the COVID epidemic, and you made us all so proud. You did a fantastic job.
Well, you're trying to say that. I was worried it was just too long. Thank you.
They have the mic on Biden, so let's just listen to this.
Thank you for talking about cancer. Cancer survivors.
We really can do so much of a focus.
You were terrific, forceful, and just substantive. Thank you, Mr. President, for signing the matter. We're going to go from 130,000 prescribers of buprenorphine to 1.8 million. That's hope for the addicted.
It really is.
It was masterful. It's a legacy beyond belief.
That's because of you.
Mr. President, I just have to tell you, you got a bunch of crowds of Republicans trying to shake your hand. I want to make sure
Long Island, sir.
Good to see you. Where in Long Island?
East End, Suffolk County, sir.
Long Island. You ever been to Long Island? It's magnificent. I used to live in Garden City.
Just a little bit west of me, sir, but you're welcome back anytime.
All right, man.
you got somebody behind me.
Yep, all good.
Okay, I just want to make this point. This was a green-on speech. I'm going to run across America with this speech and this thing about American progress. And I think if we lean in, we'll get Republican journalism and police reform and get this done in the first 3 months.
I think so too. I'm praying for it because it's an opportunity.
We're going to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words. They speak exactly to my constituents in my district, and I know that they're really going to appreciate it.
What's your district in Cleveland?
8th District of Colorado, in those northeast suburbs of Denver, and goes
Northeast.
into Greeley, which is a rural community.
I'm just getting
Big
this.
and ag.
I'm getting this selfie, please. Then I get it.
There you go.
Oh, I'm bid to You're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed.
He's trying to make me feel good. She erased it.
I really appreciate you taking so much time. That meeting was tremendous. Great for you. Thank you so much for taking such You got it.
Thank you for We've got to reauthorize it this year, so.
Madam President, that was a strong speech, sir. And we're still working to get the mom message. We're not going to give up, sir. Thank you.
No, the camera side. The battery just don't be.
Thank you.
I think I started.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. President, good to see you again.
CNN is reporting right now that Mitt Romney told George Santos, quote, "You don't belong here." And NBC is reporting that Romney told George Santos, quote, "He's a sick puppy. He shouldn't have been there. Given the fact that he's under ethics investigation, he should be sitting in the back row and being quiet instead of parading in front of the president." Wow. I did see a clip earlier on Twitter where I think it was my friend Aaron Rupar shared it, where he said, "Oh, it looks like Mitt Romney said the word embarrassed or embarrassing to George Santos." And I was like thinking to myself, like, is it possible that McCarthy told George Santos that he should be embarrassed to be there, or that he's like embarrassing? And I was like, no, there's no way that he would have said that. And I looked, and I thought that though, and it turns out, according to CNN and NBC now, that Mitt Romney did tell George Santos that like he shouldn't have been there. Wow, that's wild. Quote, "You don't belong here."
Okay, still no update on a Republican response yet. As soon as I have any information on a Republican response, I will post that here. This is a pretty long speech, looking like it clocked in at about an hour and 13 minutes. Last year's speech was just over an hour. I don't know. These are just whatever. This is like the standard pontificating afterwards. I'm not going to talk about how many applause breaks there were. But something that you'll have noticed. Here we go. Some more information on Mitt Romney. This is according to a reporter from The Hill. Yes, Mitt Romney called Santos a sick puppy who shouldn't have been there. And when asked if he called him an embarrassment, he said, quote, "I don't know the exact words I said. He shouldn't have been there. Look, he's a sick puppy. He shouldn't have been there." So if one thing is clear, it's that George Santos, according to Mitt Romney, is indeed a sick puppy. And he did call him an embarrassment, because that's the word that we did see in the clip prior. So, yeah, things seem to be going pretty well on the right. Republicans in disarray. Marjorie Taylor Greene, throughout the entire speech, was having a little trouble containing herself as she screamed throughout the entirety of that speech, basically. Any chance she got, because God forbid the attention isn't on her in a few seconds. Marjorie Taylor Greene also posted a video complaining that this week that she isn't making enough money, that she made more money before she was in Congress, that that her life is being ruined, that people, and this is like, you cannot write this, that people will just come up to her on the street and accuse her of things that aren't true because they just read them on the internet. Marjorie Taylor Greene is complaining about what people are just reading on the internet and then assuming is true. Is there any irony left in the world at all? I mean, this is a woman who believes in QAnon, who suggested that 9/11 was faked. I mean, there is not a conspiracy theory that Marjorie Taylor Greene wouldn't believe. And yet here she is complaining that people are just believing stuff out of the blue. So that's the deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene. That is the face of the Republican Party, Kevin McCarthy's best bud. It looks like Biden's exiting the chamber here.
We let 500,000 acres go dry in agriculture last year, and I don't know where the food's going to come from.
I don't either. I've been out there some time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right.
So the two houses now resolved.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
The House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the message of the President be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union.
And it took President Biden 20 minutes to get from the podium out the door of the House as he greeted members and got lobbied on legislation and et cetera. Well, in about 5 minutes, the response from the Republicans, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will be delivered from Little Rock. That begins in about 5 minutes. Now, the president has a full schedule this week. He will be traveling and talking about some of the issues.
Okay, so there you go. 5 minutes we have until the Republican response from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. It's going to be a whole lot of bullshit here. In the pre-show, I talked a little bit about what we should expect from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's going to lean very heavily into wokeness and culture wars. Here's the thing about the whole woke agenda. The only people that you hear actually complaining about wokeness are Republicans. You don't have any Democrats coming out and saying, oh, this should be more woke, that should be more woke, we should do this. It's only stuff perpetuated by the right. Like, people who complain that the left are too focused on a woke agenda are just buying into Republican talking points that the left is pushing a woke agenda. It's not the Democrats who've come out and complained about M&Ms and them. What is the thing about M&Ms that they're like, that they're taking M&Ms away, or because they were too sexual? I'm not even sure what that culture war talking point is. But it's not the Democrats who are talking about M&Ms. It's not the Democrats who are fear-mongering about taking away your chocolate milk. It's not the Democrats who are fear-mongering about taking away your coffee. It's not the Democrats who are fear-mongering about taking away your stove. None of these are even true. The Democrats are not coming to take away your gas stoves or your M&Ms or your coffee or your Xboxes or your chocolate milk. All of these are just perpetuated by Republicans to scare people in their base into thinking that these things are going to happen, but they never happen. Show me one event where any of this stuff has happened. They fearmonger about socialism taking over. We've had Democrats in office for 8 years when Clinton was president, 8 years when Obama was president, 2 years with Joe Biden. Do we have socialism? It's just a thing that they put forward to scare you, but it never actually comes to fruition. Did the same thing about the war on Christmas. Claim that Christmas is going away, that Democrats are trying to take Christ out of Christmas, whatever that means. Is Christmas gone? Is Jesus is like the memory, is Jesus Christ like verboten now? It's just empty talking points meant to scare people, and none of this stuff actually comes true. If it did, why don't Republicans ever hold their elected officials to account for telling them that Christ was getting taken away, or that gas stoves were getting taken away, or that chocolate milk was getting taken away, or that Xboxes were taken away, or that coffee was getting taken away, or M&Ms were getting, over and over and over, Republicans put forward these talking points, fear-mongering about taking something away, about the Democrats coming and ripping these things away from you, and it never actually comes to fruition. And yet their base follows suit, hook, line, and sinker, as soon as the next day pops up and Republicans are like, oh, they're going to take away shoes. Democrats don't want you to have shoes. Democrats want to take your lights out of your house. They all just start screaming about lights out of your house. So either they are that dumb that they believe any of this performative bullshit, or they're all just in agreement that they're just going to pretend and do this performative outrage. And either way, it's super pathetic. Because if you're that gullible that you think the Democrats are coming to take away your stove out of your house, then I don't know what to tell you. There's if you're that gullible, I don't know that I can help someone like that. I don't know that anybody can help someone like that. That's that's a little beyond what I'm able to do. But otherwise, if you're just doing it for the performative nature of it, then I don't know, you're just a piece of shit liar, I guess. What's the point of just coming and scaring really gullible, dumb people into thinking that your stove is getting taken away tomorrow? Is that why you got into it? Just to lie about nonsense culture war issues? That the Democrats are taking away your precious M&Ms, which they're not doing, and M&Ms are fine and they're staying here, as is chocolate milk and coffee and Xboxes and stoves? I just can't imagine why people would get into this whole thing just to fearmonger the most embarrassing, cringy stuff. So we are moments away from Sarah Huckabee Sanders coming on. Here we go.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Being a mom to 3 young children taught me not to believe every story I hear. So forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard tonight from President Biden. From out-of-control inflation and violent crime to the dangerous border crisis and threat from China. Biden and the Democrats have failed you. They know it, and you know it. And it's time for a change. Tonight, let us reaffirm our commitment to a timeless American idea that government exists not to rule the people, but to serve the people. Democrats want to rule us with more government control, but that's not who we are. America is the greatest country the world has ever known because we're the freest country the world has ever known, with a people who are strong and resilient. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. It was a hard time for our family. particularly our kids, Scarlett, Huck, and George. But we kept our faith and persevered. Thanks to exceptional doctors here in Arkansas, a successful surgery, and the grace of God, I am cancer-free. Through it all, I couldn't help but think about my mom. She was 20 years old and in her first year of marriage when she was diagnosed with spinal cancer. The doctors told her she might not live, and if she did live, they said she'd never walk again. And if she did walk, she'd definitely never have children. The daughter she was told she'd never have was just sworn in as the new governor of Arkansas and is speaking to you tonight. Adversity and fear of the unknown can paralyze us, but faith propels us to charge boldly ahead. We can't stand still in the face of great challenges. You and I were put on this earth for such a time as this, to charge boldly ahead. I'll be the first to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom, he's for government control. At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. I'm the first woman to lead my state, and he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is. In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race, but not to love one another or our great country. Whether Joe Biden believes this madness or is simply too weak to resist it, his administration has been completely hijacked by the radical left. The dividing line in America is no longer between right or left. The choice is between normal or crazy. It's time for a new generation of Republican leadership.
Says the member of the party of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
A few weeks ago, I signed executive orders to ban CRT, racism, and indoctrination in our schools, eliminate the use of derogatory term Latinx in our government, repealed COVID orders, and said never again to authoritarian mandates and shutdowns. Americans want common sense from their leaders, but in Washington, the Biden administration is doubling down on crazy. President Biden inherited the fastest economic recovery on record, the most secure border in history, cheap, abundant, homegrown energy, fast rising wages, a rebuilt military, and a world that was stable and at peace. But over the last 2 years, Democrats destroyed it all. Despite Democrats' trillions in reckless spending and mountains of debt, we now have the worst border crisis in American history. As a mom, my heart breaks for every parent who has lost a son or daughter to addiction. 100,000 Americans a year are now killed from drug overdoses, largely from fentanyl pouring across our southern border. Yet the Biden administration refuses to secure the border and save American lives. And after years of Democrat attacks on law enforcement and calls to defund the police, violent criminals roam free, while law-abiding families live in fear. Beyond our border, from Afghanistan to Ukraine, from North Korea to Iran, President Biden's weakness puts our nation and the world at risk. And the president's refusal to stand up to China, our most formidable adversary, is dangerous and unacceptable. President Biden is unwilling to defend our border, defend our skies, and defend our people. He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief. And while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols, all while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy, and it's wrong. Make no mistake, Republicans will not surrender this fight. We will lead with courage and do what's right, not what's politically correct or convenient. Republicans believe in an America where strong families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising, where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. These are the principles Republican governors are fighting for, and in Washington, under the leadership of Senate Republicans and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, we will hold the Biden administration accountable. Down the street from where I sit is my alma mater, Little Rock Central High.
Whoops.
As a student there, I will never forget watching my dad, Governor Mike Huckabee, and President Bill Clinton hold the doors open to the Little Rock Nine. Doors that 40 years earlier had been closed to them because they were Black. Today, those children once barred from the schoolhouse are now heroes memorialized in bronze at our State House. I'm proud of the progress our country has made, and I believe giving every child access to a quality education, regardless of their race or income, is the civil rights issue of our day. Tomorrow, I will unveil an education package that will be the most far-reaching, bold, conservative education reform in the country. My plan empowers parents with real choices, improves literacy and career readiness, and helps put a good teacher in every classroom by increasing their starting salary from one of the lowest to one of the highest in the nation. Here in Arkansas and across America, Republicans are working to end the policy of trapping kids in failing schools and sentencing them to a lifetime of poverty. We will educate, not indoctrinate our kids, and put students on a path to success. It's time for a new generation to lead. This is our moment. This is our opportunity. A new generation born in the waning decades of the last century, shaped by economic booms and stock market busts, forged by the triumph of the Cold War and the tragedy of 9/11. A generation brimming with passion and new ideas to solve age-old problems. A generation moored to our deepest values and oldest traditions, yet unafraid to challenge the present order and find a better way forward. If we seize this moment together, America can once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. During my 2.5 years at the White House, I traveled on every foreign trip with the president. A trip I will never forget was on December 25th of 2018. My husband Brian and I had just cleaned up wrapping paper that was shoved into every corner of our house, thanks to our 3 kids. When I had to walk out on my own family's Christmas, unable to tell them where I was going that night, because the place I'd be traveling was so dangerous, they didn't want anybody to know that the president was going to be on the ground, even for a few hours. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. There were no lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. Our phones and computers shut down and turned in. We were going completely off the grid. Nearly 12 hours later, in the pitch black of night, we landed in the war-torn part of Western Iraq. It was again a similar scene. No lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. The only thing you could see was coming from about a mile away in a dining hall where hundreds of troops who were in the fight against ISIS had gathered expecting to celebrate Christmas with senior military leadership from around the region. They had absolutely no idea that the President and First Lady were about to walk into that room. And when they did, it was a sight and a scene and a sound I hope I never forget. The room erupted. Men and women from every race, religion, and region, every political party, every demographic you can imagine, started chanting in perfect unison over and over and over again, USA, USA, USA. It was an absolutely perfect picture of what makes our country great.
This is
One
so
of the young
corny.
soldiers yelled from the back.
This is
"Mr.
so
President,
corny. This is like some throwback to
in the
like
military because of you."
1950. Who is
The
this
president
for?
said, "And son, I'm here because of you." Shortly after, that young soldier came up to me. He said, "Sarah, you have a tough job." I told him, "What I do is nothing. You take bombs and bullets. That's a tough job." And in a moment that I know I'll cherish for the rest of my life, that soldier reached up and he pulled the Brave Rifles patch he wore on his shoulder, and he placed it into my hand, a sign of ultimate respect. And he said, "Sarah, we are in this together." Overwhelmed with emotion and speechless, I just hugged him with tears in my eyes and a grateful heart for our heroes who keep us free. That young man and everyone who has served before him, all of those who serve alongside him, and the thousands we know who will be called upon to serve after him, deserve to know they have a country and a community back home doing our part in the fight for freedom. America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom is under attack, and the America we love is in danger. President Biden and the Democrats have failed you, and it's time for a change. A new generation of Republican leaders are stepping up, not to be caretakers of the status quo, but to be change makers for the American people. We know not what the future holds, but we know who holds the future in his hands. And with God as our witness, we will show the world that America is still the place where freedom reigns and liberty will never die. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
Woof.
And,
Okay.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a new governor.
So that's a pretty clear encapsulation of both parties. Like, Biden described tangible legislative wins. He described bipartisan wins. He described lower healthcare costs. He described investing in infrastructure. He described helping veterans. He described jobs for folks with no college education. He described taking on big pharma. And on the flip side, we had Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who basically just went all in on culture wars and basically just described this woke dystopia where Democrats are it wasn't a response to anything that she actually heard. It was just her doing the usual Fox News fear-mongering, where, she basically just picks out a bunch of Mad Libs that she pulled out of that she pulled out of a comment section on some Dan Bongino Facebook video and just talked about that. Like, Sarah Huckabee Sanders literally came out and decried the Democrats as the party of crazy
She is the representative speaking tonight for the party of Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and George Santos and Mike Lindell. Like, of all people, of all words, maybe not to try to impose onto the Democrats, maybe if you're trying not to look like you're just outright projecting, you don't use the word crazy. Because if there's one thing that the Republican Party does have a monopoly on, it is the crazy in this government. I mean, the speech was generally like, it's ironic too, because, you know, you have Republicans on an endless loop claiming that Joe Biden is like low energy and too old to do everything, doesn't know what his name is, doesn't know what day of the week is. Joe Biden was super high energy the entire time. Kevin McCarthy's behind him nodding off. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders couldn't get her voice anywhere above monotone. I mean, that speech is where like charisma and energy went to die. One quote that I thought was especially telling from this speech is Sarah Huckabee Sanders goes, "Democrats want to rule us with more government control." Like, she is representing a party tonight that is currently banning books and banning women's reproductive care and trying to ban interstate travel for reproductive care, and has spent years trying to eliminate earned benefits like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Of any party that is trying to impose control onto people, I don't think it's the Democrats. Here's what the Democrats are trying to do. Here's what the Democrats did do with their 2 years in full control of government. They brought healthcare costs down. They passed a gun safety bill that has the support of like 80% of Americans. They passed veteran healthcare. They got free COVID vaccines and free COVID tests. They passed an infrastructure bill so that rural America would get broadband. Like, what are we even talking about here? Democrats had 2 full years to impose their control measures onto people. And instead they gave everybody health care to the extent that they could. They capped out-of-pocket costs for seniors at $2,000 a year. They capped insulin costs for Medicare recipients. They imposed a 15% minimum tax on companies that pay zero. Like they had the it's like she didn't watch the speech or hasn't been around for the last 2 years to see any of this actually play out. And it really is like a good reminder of the fact that regardless of what happens in reality, Republicans are going to keep pushing this like alternate reality that doesn't actually exist. It's the reality that they've made for themselves because they just need to push a narrative. And that narrative is that Democrats are destroying everything, that the economy is terrible, that jobs are going away, and that your lives are worse than they were when a Republican was in office. In reality, we've had more jobs now in this Democratic administration than in not just 2 years of any other administration, but in 4 years of any other administration. 12.1 million jobs. That's the most jobs ever in one term. And it's only 2 years in. We have the lowest unemployment rate since 1969. That's 54 years ago. Again, like, if you look at the actual facts as they bear themselves out, there is no acknowledgement from these people on the right of what is actually happening in this country. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, her whole speech was just about wokeness and CRT. She was like, I signed an executive order banning critical race theory in schools. Critical race theory isn't taught in schools. It's not taught in elementary schools. It's not taught in middle school or high school or college, undergrad. Critical race theory is a postgraduate law course that describes the intersection between race and law. The idea that, that's great that she banned critical race theory from elementary schools. I'm sure she also banned, that's like banning financial accounting from elementary schools. I don't think anybody's missing it. These kids are learning how to count by twos. These kids are learning right from left. I don't think any of them are really focusing on, the intersectionality of race and racism and the legal world in their classes where they're learning how to spell like 2-syllable words. So she also said she also signed an executive order banning racism. So that's good. At least we know that racism is gone. I don't know why anybody else didn't just think of that. Didn't just think of banning it using executive order. Thank God she did that. And hopefully somebody else can follow her lead here. So, with that said, one more request. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing. It is a huge help to me, and I really appreciate it. I do live streams for events like this. I also do trending stories every day, just 5, 6, 7, 8-minute videos once a day. I do interviews once a week, and And I do Legal Breakdown with former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, where we discuss whatever the top legal news of the day or the week is. And that's a new series that we've got right now. So anyway, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, that would be a huge help to me to please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope that the analysis was helpful, and apologize you had to sit through Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I won't do that again. And have a good night, everybody. Talk to you soon. Thanks.